across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, a very good afternoon to you. Just after 1 o'clock on Tuesday, April the 1st, I'm David Bull, in for Ian Collins himself. Now, coming up, more than half a dozen essential bills are set to rise from today, leaving millions facing hundreds of pounds in extra costs every single year. The national minimum wage has increased too, but is it enough to make a difference? Meanwhile, judges have backed down over the introduction of two-tiered justice rules after the government threatened legislation to block the guidance that could have enabled criminals from minority backgrounds to avoid jail. And there will be no free trade deal with the US without free speech. Prime Minister Keir Starmer has been warned by the United States, with hopes of avoiding Donald Trump's tariffs hinging on the case of a pro-life activist arrested for a peaceful protest. Do get in touch, please, this afternoon. The number 0344 499 1000. You can call us. You can also leave a voice note as well. You can text the word talk and your message to 87222. You can also message us on X as well at talkTV. Well, a very good afternoon to you. The 1st of April, awful April. It begins now, of course. Today marks the start of a very painful week. Pretty much everyone is going to suffer from increased costs across the board. People are going to be stung by many of the price rises and tax hikes which are coming into force. It's all over the papers this morning, but essentially everything is going up, and that includes stamp duty, road tax, council tax, a tax raid on jobs, of course, the employer national insurance contribution going up from 13.8% up to 15%, utility bills skyrocketing, and if that wasn't bad enough, TV, broadband, mobile, all going up. There really isn't much to look forward to. Joining me this afternoon, Theo Usherwood, political commentator. Have I painted a very bleak picture?
It is afternoon. Good afternoon. It's a bleak, but it's an accurate picture, yes.
Well, I think so.
Everything is going up right across the board. Energy price cap up by £111.
Yeah.
Water bills up £10 a month. Most of your TV licences up £5. Car tax up £5. Everything is going to become more expensive to a tune, it's always reckoned from their back of a fag packet maths to about £1,100 a month right across the board, and that's before you take into account, of course, the increase in national insurance contributions for employers as well. So,
and of course, when you dig into the detail, a lot of this doesn't really make much sense to me. So let's look at stamp duty, for example. So the threshold has dropped from 425 to 300,000. So therefore, people will face paying more, some £11,000 more. So I thought the idea was to get people onto the housing ladder, which that seems to fly in the face of that. But also, just in terms of, there are lots of older people who are living in houses which are far too big. They need to downsize, and of course there needs to be an incentive to do that, and it just seems to me the government is actually not doing that.
The last point you make is the more accurate point. I mean, I've seen the Telegraph have done a story, right, and they've lumped in stamp duty with road tax and council tax, and that's a bit of an anomaly, because actually stamp duty isn't the same as those other taxes because you can easily afford it. You just don't move house, you don't sell up.
Yes.
But that, of course, has a knock-on effect on the surveyors who come around to survey, get the price. It has a knock-on effect on mortgage companies, that they want to lend money because they want to make money. Solicitors' fees, estate agents, they're no longer making money. We want to be encouraging, the government needs to be encouraging people to move house, because if they're doing that, then it's a whole wealth of sectors that benefit as a result.
So let's look at road tax. You mentioned it goes up by £5, but also in terms of electric cars, which I drive, of course, you've been exempt from road tax. That is changing, so it means you're going to pay £195 for the pleasure of driving on the roads. That makes sense to me because, of course, electric cars are heavier and tend to impart more damage to the roads. But also, this is the bit that I don't understand, they're also going to hit it with an expensive car premium of, say, £400.
Yeah.
Most electric cars tend to be quite expensive, so therefore they will be hit. I thought the whole point was to get people into electric cars.
Yes, but what happens is that, and we've seen this previously, David, is that you create an incentive to buy an electric car, and by making it tax exempt, and then people buy electric cars, and then what the Treasury sees is it sees that everybody moves across and suddenly they're hitting their tax revenues. So it looks like a great idea to start off with. It is a great idea to start off with, but then as people move across from diesel and petrol cars into electric cars, the tax revenue goes down. So inevitably, if you're thinking about getting an electric car, and I'm sure there's going to be, as the cars become more efficient and the tax exemptions, increase, but of course you end up in a situation where the Treasury loses out as people buy into technological innovation and progression, and so they have to inevitably tax that thing in the first.
No, I get all of that, but equally we don't have the energy infrastructure in this country. Of course, Mad Ed Miliband is desperate to put pylons all over the place, and of course you need to incentivise people to make that leap. Also, the government, if you remember, trying to get people to buy diesel cars. They're saying that actually the drivers of diesel cars will be hit with a £5,490 bill. So it seems to me that it's deeply unfair where government tries to incentivise you to do one thing and then comes after you later on in life and tries to clobber you with tax.
Yes, but that was always under Gordon Brown, wasn't he? That he was a big advocate for diesel cars. They were thought at the time to be more efficient. Lots of people went out and bought a diesel car, but then of course you've seen in London with ULEZ and the congestion charge, diesel cars now are out. You cannot drive. It is so punitively expensive now to drive a diesel car more than 10 years old. You simply don't do it, and therefore, I went and bought a new car not so recently, but I went to bought a new car, and people were really cottoning onto this up in northwest London. I went to one of those big out of town, well, not even out of town, but one of those big, and it was like a diesel car graveyard. It was literally rows and rows of mainly a lot of Volkswagens, but everybody was cottoning on to the fact that diesel cars were just so punitively expensive you couldn't buy them any longer. And of course that has a knock-on impact on the car industry as well. But the thing with electric, the crossover, and I've been weighing up getting a new car, do I go electric? They're fine if you just are going away for a day or you're doing a day's errands. You can come back, charge it up, and you have a driveway. But if you don't have a driveway,
well, you
and you've got to then
it.
put a cable out of your house to charge up the vehicle, that's another thing. But if you want to go, I had a friend who went up to Newcastle, came back from Newcastle in his electric car. It took 14 hours.
What?
Because he needed to charge up the battery.
Right.
So he got up to Newcastle.
But that goes back to my bigger point, which is actually if you spend the money, which is going to then get you your premium car tax, which is going to be applied to that vehicle. So mine does 300 miles before it needs a charge. So that's quite good. Also, the charging infrastructure for the particular car I drive is very good.
How long does it take you to charge your car?
Well, at a supercharger, about 30 minutes.
And then you get 100%?
I will get about 200 miles on that.
And do you have one near you where you live?
I do, but also I charge mine off solar panels because I don't want to pay the electricity prices. So all of
you're better than Martin.
But I was an early adopter. Well, I was an early adopter, so I did it 8 years ago.
Save money with Dr. David Ball.
Well, you see, yes, Martin
clinic.
Lewis, I'll give you a run for your money. Let's also talk about council tax, of course, because we're seeing a reduction in services across the board. My rubbish never seems to be collected. Of course, the government is allowing them to increase by 4.99% without actually triggering a local referendum. They're all actually going up by 4.99%. Wait for this, I talked about this yesterday. Bradford, Labour-controlled, wanted nearly 15%. Hampshire wanted nearly 15%. Windsor and Maidenhead wanted 25%. They're not allowed to have that. They get 8.99% across the board. Yes. But it's a heck of a jump.
It's a heck of a jump, but it's worth recognising, of course, that within the government spending review, and this has been going back to austerities, you have protected departments. So the government will say, we're going to spend money on the NHS, we're going to spend money on the Department for Education, we're not going to cut those budgets. But that puts a huge amount of pressure on departments which do not see their budgets ring-fenced. One of the key ones is the Department for, and now it's called the Department of Communities and Local Government. That's Angela Rayner's department. Yeah. And that's seen their budget slashed because they're having to make up for the fact that other budgets have had their money ring-fenced, other departments have had their budgets ring-fenced, especially now defence. We're seeing, we've seen this promise to increase defence spending to 2.5% of GDP by 2027. Yeah. It only puts the pressure on transport, on justice, on the Home Office, or not all of the Home Office, but and on the Department for Housing as well. And that creates a huge amount of pressure because local government then have to cut their services, and therefore, and they have statutory services they have to provide, by the way, including children's care and adult social care.
Yeah.
So what they do inevitably...
That's the big one. Adult social care.
Yeah, adult social care is huge, and also children's social care as well. They have a legal obligation to provide those services. So what they do is they look to increase their council tax every single time, and they also look at other ways of raising revenue, aggressive parking parking attendants, parking wardens, for example, to ensure that they get the most money, they can extract the most money. And you've got another interesting story from The Spectator, by the way.
Well, I do.
Which feeds into this.
Well, so this is a really interesting article, and I was reading it. And essentially, let me just paraphrase it. So essentially what it says, say you're a young woman and you have a flat in London, okay, and you fall in love with a chap in Devon, okay, and you get married. So you just happen, because you've worked really hard, you have 2 properties, but your primary residence becomes Devon. So therefore, you pay your normal council tax on Devon. Now, what the government is allowing them to do is to double your council tax by 100% in your secondary residence. Now, the bit that doesn't make any sense to me is, if we're saying that we want people back in work and we want people who are high up that chain in management terms to be back in the office, they need somewhere to live, say in London or in one of the big cities or in Birmingham, wherever. But what we're doing is we are actually punishing them for being back in the workplace, which is counterintuitive.
Yes, it doesn't. This is another way that they're giving more money-raising powers, tax-raising powers to local authorities under the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act of 2023. And of course, this kicks in this April. Councils are going to be able to make this charge. But you're quite right to say, we want people back in work. We want people spending money in the shops, going out for lunch breaks, getting their dry cleaning done. But this is only going to, in that scenario, incentivise people to say, you know what, I'm going to stay down and I'm going to sell up in London, stay down, work from home, and maybe just get a hotel which is okay, punitively expensive, or a way of just coming out 1 day a week or 2 days a week.
So a typical annual council tax, say if it's 2,000, will go to £4,000 a year. But also, the bit that I don't get is you're already paying council tax for another property. Also, you're not using the services because you're not in that property half the time, and you're paying the same amount as a family of 8 living next door. That doesn't seem fair.
No.
Which goes back actually to Margaret Thatcher and the community charge.
It's not fair, but they want to, they've had the counter-argument from the government's point of view is that they don't want people owning 2 homes, second homes. And so that they would make the argument...
A tax on aspiration.
Tax on aspiration, but they want to keep prices down. Their argument would be, well, you keep prices down in Devon because you force people to have one property, they need to work in London, they can live in London. Yeah. And the couple where the chap has got the place in Devon would sell up in Devon and move to London. The property would be available.
Into a 1-bed? Say if you've got children, for example.
Well, I guess you'd have to sell the 1-bed flat and then buy something slightly larger.
And as you say, then they stay at home, they don't go to work, and therefore that then is counterintuitive to what the government is trying to achieve in the first place. Yes. So it seems to me, and there is a running theme here, which is there is no joined-up thinking in government at all.
They're not. I think part of the problem with the government at the moment is that they are looking to tax to make the pip squeak, and they're not. What they're not thinking about is actually how can we support, and this has been the long-running criticism, David, how can we support economic growth? The increase in stamp duty, fine, but we want people to sell their homes.
We do.
We want people to buy new homes, and if you're making it punitively expensive to get onto the housing ladder and to get up the housing ladder, and you're not that is not a good thing. And we know that if you can cut taxes in sensible and targeted ways, then it's perfectly possible that you can actually, get people trading, moving, and increase the tax revenue because the economy is growing.
Loads of messages already coming in. Joanna in Salisbury says, hi David, moving house is ridiculously expensive. Stamp duty in and out plus tax on equity gained, not to mention moving costs, and nothing fits. I have no reason to downsize again. And that proves the point I was trying to make.
Yes. No, but it's Joanna who's messaging. Joanna's messaging. Joanna probably recognises, listening now, I hope I'm not putting words into her mouth, but that her house is probably too big. She doesn't need that. She doesn't need the extra couple of bedrooms, and actually, that home would do really well for a family a growing family. But she's got why would she cut her nose off to spite her face by selling up and being hit with a tax?
And of course, on top of that, not only council tax, you've then got the corporation, the national employer contribution, which is going up. Of course, 300,000 businesses saying they're going to cut staff as a result of that.
85,000 jobs and that's from the Resolution Foundation.
Yes,
that's
and again, not thought through. None of this is thought through.
Well, the government, the part of the problem the government has got themselves into is that they didn't listen, and had they consulted, David, or had they just floated the idea of increasing national insurance contributions for employers before the budget of last October, and listened to the likes of the chief executives of Asda or Tesco, or those who run the hospitality industry and employ large amounts of people, and dealing often with very fine profit margins. These are people who sell at scale, and it only takes a small hit to knock their profits out of whack completely. Then they would have got a message back that increasing national insurance contributions for employers would be a very bad move. We need, and I feel also sorry for the part-time employees.
So do
we
I.
live in a febrile economy at the moment, and we need employers to be saying, actually, you know what, you've worked for us for 6 months. We really like the look of you. Turned up on time. How about we give you a permanent job? And that would be something that for somebody on a minimum wage, national living wage, whatever it is, that would be a real. That would be a really good thing, because they'd then have the certainty. But of course, Labour saying, well, we want to introduce the employment. You've got the employment rights coming down the track very soon, which is going to make it more expensive, or potentially make it more punitive to take on full-time staff. And it's just making it's not cogent what the government is doing. And they're advertising. Treasury's advertising for a business engagement lead I saw in one of the round robin emails this morning, and advertising it at £65,000 a year. They need to be getting in a real business leader who, put them on a really high salary, so you can get the best person into the job, and start advising the Treasury on actually what businesses need and want in order to expand.
And also, just before we came on air, we were talking about the town hall bosses enjoying record salaries far higher than the Prime Minister. That sticks in your throat when you're being squeezed in every direction, whether it's your energy price cap or water bills or broadband or whatever. Then also the decimation of services, and they get an increase in salary. That can't be right.
You've got some of the bosses at the councils are running over £500,000 a year.
So Castle Point in Essex, this is Chris Mills, former strategic director of Castle Point, £565,000. Unacceptable.
But what? Tell me a job that is more important than being Prime Minister. A job that is more demanding than being Prime Minister. And I don't understand. There should be just you can still get the best people for £175,000 a year, or £172,000 the Prime Minister.
Well, I would have thought
and you have preferential conditions to the private sector.
Yes.
You have incredibly generous pension schemes compared to the private sector. OK, you're not going to have maybe the same bonus scheme that many of those firms, employees enjoy who work in the City of London. But it's a pretty good job, and you can attract good people without paying them extortionate amounts of money. And I don't understand. There needs to be. This is what your listeners. This is what the public hate. They see their services being cut on the one hand, and then they see bosses enjoying, £500,000 salaries on the other, and they're saying, well, hang on a moment, how many care workers would that? If you let's say that Chris Mills, let's say he earned £175,000 a year. So he's being left with what, 325,000. How many? That's
a lot.
That's 8, 12. That's 13 care workers on 25 grand a year.
Yeah.
13 care workers.
Great maths. But you're right, you're absolutely right. And of course, at the same time, also, we're seeing all this illegal immigration coming in, and we'll show this later. A video of people showing their accommodation, which is being paid for by the taxpayer. £5.38 billion being spent on illegal migrants, and of course, 8,000 more in hotels than there were before Starmer came into power.
This is a problem that's not going to go away. I'll make a prediction now, and I know other people have made it, so I'm not saying anything particularly new, but if they don't get on top of this by the general election, I would, by the sort of the year going into the general election, so let's say Christmas 28, this is going to, the Labour government's going to reap a whirlwind on this particular issue.
I would agree. Theo, thank you for the moment. We'll take a break. We'll continue with some of the top stories after this break. Keep all your messages coming in, please. I'm asking this afternoon, what impact, given awful April, what impact will the tax rises have on you and your family? Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Our UK Trade Secretary took 5 months before getting on a plane and sitting down for face-to-face talks. If I was the Trade Secretary, I would have been on the plane the next day after the US election and camped out in Mar-a-Lago until I got a deal to protect British jobs, British workers and the British economy. The government's done none of those things. We're looking down the barrel of real uncertainty. 20% of our car exports alone go to the United States, and this government has no plan. When they negotiate, Britain loses.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk 125. Let's move on very quickly. We have managed to gossip a little bit. Let's talk about private schools. Private schools accusing the government of failing to consult their sector over a VAT rate on their fees. They've taken the government to the High Court today. It's the first day, actually, in the High Court. And, of course, they're losing their charitable status. They've had VAT imposed. They thought it would be imposed at the beginning of the school year. The government imposed it halfway through the year, which I think is draconian and absolutely unacceptable. And the government says, well, it's not having any impact on the number of kids who will stay at private schools. That is utter nonsense.
Yes, but this is particularly egregious where you consider special needs education.
Agreed.
And so you have parents who pay private school fees to schools which specialise in looking after children with additional needs. And of course, the government has decided to impose VAT, and they're included within that as well. And if the parents can't afford those fees because they are now 20% higher as a result of the increase in VAT, which is significant, as you say, then those children won't be able to access education. And this is where the government is going to find itself in difficulty. And I wouldn't want to predict which way the courts will come down on this. But there is, and this goes back to Gordon Brown, I think it's called the Every Child Matters programme. And basically it means that local authorities have a statutory responsibility to provide, or every child has a responsibility to have an education, regardless. So every child, if you were in this country, a child in this country, you have a right to an education. And if the only place that can provide that education is a special needs school which is close to where you live, then you have the right to access education. Now, many parents are paying the fees out of pocket for their child to access their education. They can't get their child into a mainstream school. Their child won't be able to get in because they might suffer from severe anxiety or whatever that prevents them from accessing their education. And I think where it may well actually fall against the government is if that child therefore can't get in as a result of this VAT rise into their special needs school because their parents can't afford the fees, then I would expect that the government would fall on the wrong side of this judgment.
Well, so Lord Panic, KC, is a human rights barrister, leading human rights barrister. They are actually including cases of children with special educational needs and disabilities, a vulnerable girl in a single-sex school, minority Jewish and Muslim families, foreign nationals in bilingual schools. But also when you look at the numbers, already 3,000 fewer pupils have started at private schools. And when you look at the numbers, and in terms of institutes like Adam Smith Institutes, shows that it would actually cost 1.6 billion, and actually the government may well end up out of pocket. So it's ideological. It's ideological. It's totally ideological.
It's ideological. We've seen the same ideology as part of this drive, when it comes to hitting academies with rules that mean that they can't take on you can't employ a former Olympian to teach PE or a microbiologist to teach science without teaching because they don't have a teaching qualification. And what the argument from the government, and I don't agree with it, but the argument from the government is that what they want to do is they want to raise standards across the board.
Sure.
They don't want to create a meritocracy where you have some schools doing very well and other schools not doing so well as as a result, because if you have good schools, then you have parents who can get their children into the good schools, and parents who can't get their children into
500,000 kids in private schools, which saves the country 4.5 billion quid. By abolishing that and making them go into the state system, then the resources from the state system will be watered down. And actually, there aren't enough places anyway. So the government also has a statutory responsibility to ensure that every child has an education.
But I think it's almost worse than that. Let's just face facts that actually many of those children who are in those private schools, Eton's not going to be hit by this.
No.
Harrow's not going to be hit by this. If you are rich,
it's the small independent schools.
if you're well off, you're not going to be hurt by this change, because you can just shell out. You can pay that 20%. It doesn't matter. It's like it's small. It's chump change, isn't it? But for many families who have aspirations for their children to do well and are working their extra job, who are sandwiches at lunch, taking the bus fare, doing everything in their power to save and scrimp, not taking a holiday in the summer, just staying in the UK, because what they want to do is they want to pay for the fees in order to put their children through the best possible education with smaller class sizes and so forth. What this will do is penalise those individuals.
Yeah. Final story, if I may. This is amazing. The public are likely to comply with lockdown measures to halt a new pandemic.
Can't wait.
Is a poll. Well, I can't quite believe this. This is a Savanta poll of 2,205 people last weekend. Apparently, 38% of respondents said they would be more likely to comply with a lockdown, full lockdown measures now in response to a new pandemic compared with the coronavirus pandemic. But also, what is fascinating about this is the party political division. So those people who affiliate with Reform UK are less likely to comply with a lockdown, and I'm not surprised by that in the slightest, as opposed to some of the other political affiliations.
Yes, and of course, lockdown measures, the government argued, this was Conservative government, were necessary. Labour, the current government...
It did nothing. It achieved nothing. Apart from social isolation for the elderly and the dying.
I think this is my view.
Yes.
Right. In the short term, the lockdown measures were really important. But where I have a problem with the lockdown measures was that they, especially when we went into the winter of 2021 and they were introduced again, is that not enough was done in order to ensure that the most vulnerable were supported. And so what you ended up with, and I know parents right across the board whose children were affected by lockdown and they've never really come out of it. I know elderly people
100%.
close to me even who were affected by lockdown, and everybody just looked at it from the science point of view, didn't they? They just went, well, Chris Whitty says this, look, Patrick Vallance says this, we've got to, there was that graph where, and I remember sitting there and it was like 4,000 deaths a day by the middle of December or whatever it was. It was something like that.
And actually, listening to Boris Johnson and his book Unleashed, he says it was those figures that disturbed him so much that he altered course and he ordered the lockdown against his better wishes and judgment.
But there was but there was also a cost, and we're going to feel this cost, I fear, for many years. Going, as those children grow up and they want to go to university and they want to go into the workplace, and by the same token, I think young people who are coming into the workplace now are feeling it, and it's just I just worry that the really important lesson, particularly with education, hasn't been learned, and God forbid we have another pandemic like the one we saw with COVID-19, that we just do the same thing again and we don't really think really carefully about the long-term implications on society, because there was a trade-off to be made, but nobody wanted to make the trade-off. They just wanted to do the lockdown and forget about the long-term consequences. We can't do that again, but I fear that our politicians will do exactly that.
So do I. Theo, really good to see you. Thank you very much for coming in this afternoon. Theo Usherwood there, political commentator. Lots of you getting in touch. This is Betty. Dr. B, you're looking fab today. Thank you very much. That's very sweet of you. How many people in the council areas are getting their tax paid or exempt? That plus wages and pensions, that's where the money is going. Private sector is providing service cheaper to them every year. So where is the cash going? That is a good point. David, Dr. David, you're wrong on second homes. A place to live should not be an investment. That wasn't the point I was actually making. Rich people buying up homes to make money from poor people who can't afford to buy, because rich people buy at higher prices and push up rents by reducing stock. But the point is that what the government is forcing people to do actually is for those landlords or people who were living in those properties to then leave and rent them out, so therefore creating even more private landlords. So again, it makes no sense to me whatsoever. We'll take a break. After the break, I'm going to be talking to John Redwood, former Conservative MP, about the cost of living and awful April. This is talkTV.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Let's talk about awful April, shall we? It is April the 1st, and today marks the start of a very painful week for pretty much everyone in the country, where almost everyone in the country will be stung with many price hikes. Let's just look at what is going up. Stamp duty, road tax, council tax, a tax raid on jobs, the employer national insurance contribution going from 13.8% to 15%, which will have a massive impact on companies and how many people they actually employ. We're seeing utility bills going up. I was just reading here about water, which is going to go up about £10 a month. Anglian customers, which is where I live in East Anglia, 19% more, or about £626 a year more for the same service. The energy price cap also going up by 6.4% today. Also, that means that typical gas and electricity bills will increase by about £100 a year, £111, from £1,738 to £1,849. Also, I just want to talk about pensioners, because they've already been stripped of their winter fuel allowance, and now, of course, they are going to be hit very hard indeed because of all these price rises. Then, of course, and talking about the elderly, they're the ones who are more likely to be at home watching television, for example, and of course the BBC licence fee is also going up. So it is not good news across the board. Now, Keir Starmer has defended the government's approach, saying wages, however, for the poorest will also increase. But is it enough?
You may have seen from the Spring Statement last week, the prediction is that everybody will be on average about £500 a year better off because living standards are going up. So it's really important that we deliver on that, because I think people do feel after the last few years that more money in the front pocket and feeling better off is hugely important, and I'm conscious of the fact that bills are going up at the same time, and therefore making sure wages and what goes in the pocket outstrips what's going out in bills is really important.
So apparently everyone is going to feel better off. However, the Shadow Business Secretary Andrew Griffith told Talk this morning that the rise in bills will leave people more out of pocket.
Part that the government is responsible for is the increase in tax. What they're doing is putting up the cost of employing everybody, and remember that cost is in almost everything we do, whether it's a nursery, a hospice or a business. Businesses are desperately trying to make ends meet, and that's the reason why we're seeing so many price rises. Ultimately, as Conservatives have always said, it's consumers, it's all of us that end up paying the burden for those tax rises. And if you're Rachel Reeves and you come on in and you raise taxes by £40 billion a year, then sure as God made little apples, they're going to cascade through the economy and end up on those bills that consumers are opening now.
Andrew Griffith there talking to Mike Graham this morning. Well, joining me now is John Redwood, former Conservative Member of Parliament. Good afternoon, John.
Good afternoon.
It's a pretty miserable April, isn't it? Awful April. The price hikes across the board. What do you make of the comment by the Prime Minister saying, well, most people will be better off?
Well, I don't know how on earth he thinks he can get away with that statement. As we've just been hearing, the costs of government are exploding and they're charging it on to us. Higher taxes, higher prices they directly control. And their regulators are pushing through enormous price increases. And you're right about the water bills. The average is going to be up by more than a quarter. And the most expensive region, it's going to be 47%. I mean, how can people keep pace with that? And how does the Prime Minister then think we're going to be better off at the end of it? It's just crazy.
It is crazy, just in terms of being hit by a multitude of factors. When you look at, for example, stamp duty, let's just talk about that, because we and the government wants older people to move homes. If you're sitting in a house, say you've got 3-4 bedrooms and you want to move and downsize, but the government is actually actively discouraging you from doing so.
Well, that's right. They're taxing mobility. And as you say, they're stopping people downsizing and they're stopping people getting onto the housing ladder in the first place. But just look at what the councils are doing. Council tax up by an average of 5% in England, but some of the worst ones are 9 or 10%. In Scotland, it's a 9.5% average, with the top one over 15%. I mean, these people are spending money like water. They're wasting a lot of it. They're putting up the salaries of their well-paid six-figure salary people by more than inflation, and they expect the poor old taxpayer, including the pensioner on a low income, to just fork out this massive increase in the bill.
Yeah, so town hall bosses, according to the Telegraph this morning, are enjoying record salaries. 4,000 local authority staff received more than £100,000 in 2023-24. That's up by more than a quarter. The Prime Minister gets £172,000. Let's just look at the SNP-run Glasgow Council. The former chief executive got £567,317. Chris Mills in Castle Point in Essex, £565,000. It's unacceptable.
Completely unacceptable. 238 council bosses get more than the Prime Minister, and everybody would agree the Prime Minister is the most demanding of the political and government jobs there are. And you see in the rest of the public sector, there are quite a lot on £500,000 plus packages, as at the Post Office or the Bank of England. But just look at the results. The Bank of England presides over 11% inflation when it's meant to keep to 2%. And then loses a packet on its bad bond trading. And the Post Office sends some of its best staff to prison on fraudulent charges, and we pay them over £500,000 each.
Can I just read you some of these, because they're absolutely gobsmacking. My local town parish council portion of my council tax has increased by 32%. That is the woo-woo. This one from Tanya says, David, my water bill has gone up by 49% from £359 to £535. This one from Nick in Kent says, good afternoon, David. South East Water, wait for this, John, has taken £99 out of my bank account this morning. Usual direct debit was £37, so they nicked £99. I live on my own, so how on earth will I use £100 worth of water per month? That has to wipe out my pay rise, which I don't get until the end of the month. That's before the increase in all my other bills, so I am totally worse off, which means the Prime Minister is wrong.
Yeah, he is wrong, and he's got the mood of the nation wrong on this. We want him at home more often, concentrating on our own domestic troubles, because he travels around the world trying to solve the problems of every other country, when he's not giving bits of the country away as he's foolishly doing with the Chagos Islands. So we need him back here to understand what it is like to be on a low income or a low pension, facing a water bill that's going up by more than a quarter, or facing an energy bill that's going up another 6 and a bit percent when it went up 1.2% in January anyway.
Yeah. I was talking to Theo about this, just the lack of joined up thinking in government, because I thought the idea of government was to get people to move into electric cars. But at the same time, they're now imposing punitive taxes on electric cars of £195 plus the expensive car supplement of £400. So we're now talking about £620 in addition. That is counterintuitive to what they say they are trying to achieve.
Well, it is, but then you see when they've got as big an overspend and as big a borrowing as they've currently got, they're desperate for money from anywhere. And as people do switch to electric cars, they lose an absolute barrel of money because all those of us with petrol and diesel cars are taxed to the hilt already. But they're also getting people to switch to electric cars when it means burning more gas in a gas power station to recharge them. So I don't really see what the point of it all is, because it is monumentally expensive for those doing that journey.
Lots of people getting in touch about this, saying, David, this is Debbie. It's quite interesting. The article in The Spectator, which I talked to Theo about, saying the government wants the management of companies to get back into the office, which I agree with, that you need corporate bonding. You want people back in the office to have collegiate spirit. Now, if you happen, and I mentioned this earlier, if you are, say, a young woman, you had a flat in London, you met a chap in Devon, and then you decided you wanted to get married and you moved to Devon, that's your primary residence. So London or wherever becomes your secondary residence, but you need it for work to be in the office. Now the council can hit you with an increment of 100% in your council tax. That just doesn't make sense either.
No, well, that is really wicked. Anyone who needs a flat in London now paying double the amount of council tax, when, of course, they use considerably less of the services because they're not there the whole week. And it's just another part of rip-off government, isn't it? And what we want them to do is to run a limited number of important services well and economically, and get on top of their budgets. Instead, it's runaway expenditure, runaway borrowing, and then hand in pockets of anyone who works hard.
And of course, the irony, which Debbie has pointed out, so only politicians can have 2 homes then. And we pay for those 2 homes. No one else is allowed to have 2 homes.
Well, that's right, absolutely. And again, it's humbug, isn't it? Because a lot of other people have jobs which require working in more than one place, or as you say, people's love life might be such that they need to be away from home for the working part of the week, and why should they be taxed extra?
Well, Rich says, Dr. B, please ask the various Tories how they would have prevented the council rises with a slim majority and no control of migration or net zero. That is the elephant in the room, isn't it, actually, that we are paying a fortune for people who have come here illegally into this country. 5.38 billion, 8,000 more in hotels. The government, us, we're paying for it. And yet we are not seeing any kind of benefit from Keir Starmer trying to smash the gangs.
Well, that's right. And as someone who takes an independent view of these things, I didn't fight the last election. One of my unhappinesses was that I thought the Conservatives in government let in far too many people, both legally and illegally. And it should be very easy and very quick to stop legal migration, because it requires a minister and his or her officials to sign visas for everybody. So just stop signing them. And when the employers say, oh, we're short of some cheap labour, you say, well, why don't you mechanise a bit more? Why don't you pay a proper wage? Why don't you employ one of those hundreds of thousands already in the country who aren't employed?
And I think what really sticks in your throat is when you read The Sun today, dingy migrants, these are people coming illegally to this country, are filming these videos, boasting about their new life in the United Kingdom, spending time in lovely hotel rooms, which many people would aspire to being in. And of course, we're paying for it.
Well, that's right. And they're often the business visitor hotels we used to use that aren't available for more normal purposes. But that is exactly why people are so resentful. And they practically all on the small boat people who come from France, perfectly safe country. But France doesn't offer them a 4-star hotel and the benefits to go with it, or the likelihood that then eventually they will be allowed in legally, even though they came in illegally. So no wonder they try and get to Britain. The Prime Minister was elected on the prospectus that he knew how to smash the gangs and stop the trade. And now we see far more coming in on small boats even than under the last government.
Can I just ask you whether is all of this ideologically driven, or certainly some of those tax rises? I'm thinking particularly about private schools, because, of course, the High Court case begins today by the private schools. They say the government failed to consult their sector over the VAT rate on fees. Of course, they're losing their charitable status as well. The government says, well, actually, this is about raising more money, which goes into state education. But many of the independent bodies are saying, actually, the government will lose money because of the sheer numbers of people coming out of private education. Those people, middle-class families where both parents work very hard to ensure their kids can go to an independent school. I'm not talking about Eton and Harrow, I'm talking about the middle independent schools. And, of course, the government is determined to push ahead with this, despite the High Court case.
Yeah, that's right. It's a jealousy tax, isn't it? And they love jealousy taxes. I mean, it's the same thing with more expensive cars, or it's the same thing if you have got a small flat that you work from, as well as having your main home where your family is. They just want to tax anything that shows that people are a bit better off than the average, even though they work very hard for it, maybe creating jobs and investments for the benefit of the wider world. And that's why millionaires as well as billionaires are now queuing up to get out of this country and leaving in great numbers. So as you rightly say, these jealousy taxes often mean less tax overall. You lose money every time a rich person walks out of this country. That's a drop in the tax revenues.
And, of course, Lashmi Mittal, of course, talking about leaving the country. Charlie Mullins, a very seasoned businessman as well, who's left to go to Spain. With your experience in politics, what advice would you give Keir Starmer in terms of sorting out his house, getting on top of illegal migration and actually sorting this country out?
Well, I would say to him, be at home more, take these problems that talkTV highlights every day more seriously, because you speak for a very big number of people. It's why 50% of the public are saying they favour Conservative or Reform now, after just a few months of this Labour government. And what has he got to do? Well, he should immediately clamp legal migration. They need much tougher criteria before letting people into the country to take it down by hundreds of thousands. And on the small boats, I think it's tough talking with France, because we don't get all these small boats out of Belgium. They police their beaches rather better, otherwise they would be used. And so I do think there has to be a much tougher talk with France to get them to understand they've got to enforce it, because they are the ones allowing illegal boat journeys, very dangerous boat journeys, running the risk of people drowning and dying. And you'd have thought they'd want to regulate their transport rather better.
Sir John Redwood, always good to talk to you. Thank you very much for your time. John Redwood. Sir John Redwood, there, former Conservative MP. Lots of you getting in touch, actually huge numbers getting in touch. How many council tax bills are going up, David, because of the growing number of houses inhabited by people who do not pay council tax, including students? That's Fiona in Leeds. Graham Johnston, of course, we're going to be talking about the national emergency declared in Birmingham over the bin collections. Collecting bins, according to Graham, is not an arduous job anymore. Housewives wheel their bins to the pavement, great point, and the dustbin workers wheel it to their vehicle where a mechanical hoist empties it. So sack the lot, employ those on benefits who can work and make work pay. Reg, good afternoon to you. After reviewing my outgoings for the next 12 months, the only thing I can cancel legally is my television licence. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to say goodbye to live TV. Laurie says, David, my water bill, this is Thames Water, is going up by £24 every single month. Kenny, one of our regulars, good afternoon to you. David, my rent, council tax, my water charges add up to a little over 9,000 of my 21,000 yearly pay. What right do councils have to take 45% of the money I have to work for, in capital letters? And for what? The service has gotten worse. No more. If they put these up even once more, I will give up my council flat. I will live on the streets again rather than being ripped off. Time for a break. After the break, your calls, thoughts and messages. This is Talk.
We need reservoirs, we need millions of homes, and we need wages to rise. All of those things are essential.
Georgina?
The books are being cooked to make it look like the hospital waiting lists are coming down. You have slashed benefits for the disabled and the elderly. The government is taking money in expenses to keep their dogs, while the elderly can't afford to heat their homes. How dare you say that the Labour Party is doing a good job?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, 5 minutes to 2. We're talking about awful April, just the plethora of taxes which are going up, which is going to hit everyone really hard indeed. Anne is on the line from Sussex. Good afternoon, Anne. How are you?
Hello. Good afternoon to you, David. How am I? Well, trying not to be too depressed by everything that's going on.
I agree, totally. What are your thoughts just in terms of we're being hit harder and harder and harder with multitude of taxes, and of course the Prime Minister says, no, actually most people are going to be better off?
Well, they've got their own agenda that they're carrying out, which is one reason why I would never have voted for them. But I'm the age of retirement, and I spent my life in the voluntary sector, literally working for nothing and caring and raising children who are all paying taxes. But what my grandchildren are going to do, I don't know. But what I did, I planned, because I'd been very involved in all the needs of the elderly community and caring and housing. I actually moved out of my house when I had a fixed mortgage and moved into independent living.
Right.
That was a bit risky.
Well, I was going to say, was that a huge kind of lurch for you?
Yes, it was. And it was because I was determined not to have to be dependent on the government to supply my needs, because I'd spent hours with elderly people being put into homes that, you know, are being trapped, and, you know, you have to take responsibility for your life and plan early. So I moved into it. The trouble is, it's one of the largest in the country, and with everything that's gone on, the expenses have really gone up. The fees that I paid when I moved in, we've been hit on every front, and the government, with their policies for older people, have not helped at all.
No, quite. And just in terms of that increment, what sort of percentage are we talking about?
Oh gosh, I'm not the world's expert.
Has it gone up by half? Has it?
50% increase.
Yeah.
And the heating grant, because like older people, and I have little asthma and some health needs, you are at home most of the day and you need heating.
Of course.
And we're being hit on every front. We are paid the lowest pensions in Europe,
Yep.
I think. Anyway, and Spanish and Italian friends of mine just can't believe the poor pensions that we have. And now they're making it harder. They do not like older people. You know why, David? Because we've lived long enough to see through the lies and deception. That's what I feel, because my whole life has been... I've been a councillor and working on different councils and seeing what goes on in local government and the health service and education. And they don't like us. They don't want people who will speak out and be different. Because we haven't been trained.
Well, it's fascinating, isn't it? Well, you are at your most left-wing when you're young, and then you tend to become more centrist, and then as you get older, this is a huge generalisation, you tend to become more right of centre as you get older, and I think you're right, actually. You see through it, you understand the different policies involved, and actually, I woke up this morning thinking, well, is it actually worth staying in this country? That means I'm getting old.
Oh dear, some people that I love, who work hard and employ a lot of people, have all said to me, we're considering leaving.
Yeah.
Well, I despair because I love my country.
As do I.
that you know that the people at the top don't seem to love our country and think it's all right that everyone with all their needs can live here. They don't have to provide everything in France. What is it about us that you can just walk into the country, come on the beaches, which they've been doing for 30-odd years, and have rights, when my poor ex-servicemen and older people do not have any rights?
It's a brilliant point, Anne. Thank you very much for your call. Always good to talk to you. That's Anne there in Sussex. Time for a break. After the break, I'm going to be talking to Alicia Fitzgerald, our political correspondent. We have the latest on the Chagos Islands deal. I'm also going to be talking about the tariffs which Donald Trump is imposing tomorrow, and the latest polls, political polls. That's all coming up after this break. Don't go anywhere. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon to you. 2 o'clock, Tuesday, April the 1st. I'm David Bull in for Ian Collins. Coming up, more than half a dozen essential bills are set to rise from today, leaving millions facing hundreds of pounds in extra costs every single year. The national minimum wage has also increased too. But is it enough to make a difference? Meanwhile, breaking news, Donald Trump has signed off the UK's deal to hand the Chagos Islands to Mauritius, with Number 10 confirming the details are being finalised after US approval. And judges have backed down over the introduction of two-tier justice rules after the government threatened legislation to block the guidance that could have enabled criminals from minority backgrounds to avoid jail. Do get in contact, please, about any of the stories that we are talking about this afternoon. Get in touch, give us a ring. You can leave a voice note as well, the number 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk as well and your message to 87222. You can also message us on X at talkTV. Well, a very good afternoon to you. We're talking about the plethora of taxes that are going to increase: stamp duty, road tax, council tax, the tax rate on jobs, the employer national insurance contribution going from 13.8% up to 15%. You've got utility bills going up, television going up, broadband going up, mobile going up. Why do we live in this country, I wonder? What impact will these tax rises actually have on you and your family? That's the question I am asking this afternoon. Loads of you getting in touch. Tristan in Bedford says, hello, David. I already have 2 jobs as my rent has gone up. I work full-time. I earn over £30,000. But with rent, with energy bills, with other bills, I'm having to do more work on my second income so I can keep paying my bills. This government is utterly deluded, and yet we just keep giving to migrants. I'm really beginning to hate living here and utterly hate this government. Fortune for net zero and fortune for migration, Labour are nothing but pathological liars. That's Tristan. Lots of other messages coming in. This is Tony in Kesgrave, my neck of the woods in Suffolk. I'm sorry, David, as a lifelong Tory voter that has moved to reform, listening to the likes of Sir John Redwood pontificate over the cost of living when the Tories had 14 years of profligate spending boils my blood. Betty, good afternoon. David, I would rent my house to a council or a young family tomorrow, but if I buy a small house or a flat, I then have to pay a second home tax on the value of the big house. Why should we have to sell to supplement government failings and mass migration? This house is my pension, which it is for many people, actually. I work 60 hours to pay for it. Maybe if everyone worked a bit harder and spent less, then the country wouldn't need to keep screwing the taxpayers. David, lovely to see you in the afternoon. Francis in Sussex, one of our regulars. Good afternoon to you. Lovely to see you this afternoon. Can't Trump put 100% tariffs on the UK until we have another election? Great idea. Keep all of those messages coming in, please. The number 0344 499 1000. Let me just bring you some breaking news. Donald Trump has signed off on the UK's deal to hand the Chagos Islands to Mauritius. Number 10 has said the details of the agreement with the Mauritian government are now being finalised, having been approved by the US president. Asked about the progress of the deal today, the Prime Minister's official spokesman said, I think the finalisation of the deal is ongoing, but will obviously provide an update as and when we have got one. Well, joining me now is Alicia Fitzgerald, our political correspondent. Good afternoon, Alicia.
Hi, David.
I'm absolutely amazed if that is true, that Trump has signed off the Chagos Islands deal.
I mean, yeah, I think you and a lot of other people, at first it was very clear that he was pretty sceptical about this deal, and so was Marco Rubio, another really key figure in the US government. All of them very, very sceptical about this. However, we did get a bit of a hint that maybe he wouldn't intervene. Last time Keir Starmer was actually in Washington when he had that meeting with Trump. Trump very much expressed that maybe he'd warmed to the idea a little bit more, and actually that it may just be the easiest thing to do, and for him not to try and fight it down.
It is strategically important, just in terms of the cost of this. When I look back at my notes going back to January, we have to pay hundreds of millions of pounds up front to Mauritius, £90 million a year to secure the UK-US airbase. The cost is estimated at 18 billion quid. Why are we paying for something which we already own?
Well, this is the thing, and I think the thing that people are maybe arguably more annoyed about is why are we paying for this now when actually budget just generally in the UK is so tight and there's so many things the government and various other people have come forward and said we just can't afford that seem really important. So people are just saying, hang on, if you can't afford the winter fuel payment for pensioners, how can you afford this deal with Mauritius? So I think there's a very big question about the timing here as well. And of course, as you mentioned, just whether that would leave us in a kind of strategically military issues, because of course we do have that air base there in the Chagos Islands. So yeah, a lot of questions about this, but it's been signed off. So I guess that's that done and dusted.
I mean, obviously, Trump is known for changing his mind, but Donald Trump, according to this copy, says leasing the US military base on Diego Garcia for 140 years was, in quotes, powerful and, in quotes, doesn't sound bad. Interestingly, and read into this what you will, Downing Street did not provide a timeline for the final stages of negotiations. I imagine until it's signed, it's not a done deal.
No, and this is the thing. I mean, anything like this is going to take so much time, because I think another key element of this is that generally the Chagosians, the people who live there, seem to be quite against it because they're worried about what it will mean about a change of their government and what powers that will give to their government that they're not massively in favour of. So there's a little bit of resistance there too, which is really important. And obviously, ultimately, the people who matter the most, I mean, of course, yes, you can say it's you know, it's belonged to us for a while, so therefore it's really important for us. It's actually most important to the people who live there. They're the ones that are going to be impacted by this the most.
Yeah, and of course they got turfed out, didn't they? And of course they want to return home. Let's talk about Donald Trump generally, because of course Keir Starmer has been cozying up to Donald Trump, new best friend and all the rest of it. And Keir Starmer was desperate to say, look, Britain is going to avoid all the tariffs that are coming in, that Trump is going to hit the ground, but the UK is going to be in a very unusual position and we will avoid those tariffs. Well, now we're hearing, this is in the Times, a sister publication, saying that Starmer is now admitting that Britain is likely to be hit by President Trump's global trade tariffs. We believe that the UK is going to be hit by 20% tariffs across the board. That is in retaliation, I believe, for VAT. Trump tomorrow is calling this Liberation Day. He says, right, I'm going in with a big bang. I'm going to hit all these countries. I'm going to put America first. I'm going to put all these tariffs on every single country, including the UK.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. You've done my explanation for me. Thanks for that.
You're welcome.
Well, no, that's exactly right. I think the idea was very much that Keir Starmer hoped, and not just Keir Starmer, the whole of the government, that they would be able to wangle some kind of exclusive exemption for the UK. And in their defence, they have actually tried to do that. However, it just hasn't worked out, sadly. Donald Trump wants to impose these tariffs to everyone across the board, the EU, outside the EU, literally everybody. And the reason that he actually wants to do this is because he wants to make more domestically produced products in the US the number one choice for the US, if that makes sense. So less imports from other countries, less reliance on other countries, and just using more of the resources they already have. And by doing this, it means that it will be more financially viable for domestic companies to promote their goods, I suppose, because the cost will be too high.
And of course, the concern here is that the UK has been pandering to the United States, of course, trying to drop all of these tariffs like the digital services tax to try to avoid any kind of tariff from Donald Trump. He is going to hit car imports with a 25% blanket tariff. That will actually hit those high-end manufacturers. I'm thinking particularly of Jaguar Land Rover, which do very well with the affluent sector in the United States. That is going to be a huge blow to British industry.
Absolutely, and we sometimes I think we forget, just because we're a really small nation, that we do actually export quite a lot, and we do have some really leading companies and leading names, like some of the ones you just mentioned in the car industry, that actually exporting these vehicles and whatever the company does is actually really important. It's a massive area of funds actually for these companies to even exist, because of course we are a small country. There's only so many people that will buy our cars here. You do actually need to rely on a global market, so this will be really, really difficult. I also saw being reported even small things like the tariffs are going to be on steel and aluminium, and you forget that that's even stuff like tinfoil, it's baking trays, it's all these random small household things that you don't really think about, and those prices will probably have to go up.
Well, of course, it's lucky that we don't make steel anymore, of course, because the Labour government's obsession with net zero and moving to an electric blast furnace. Just in terms of sort of the footwork that's been going on, it is thought that Trump sees the United Kingdom favourably, and of course I think they were trying desperately to try and avoid any kind of punitive tax which would be levied on the United Kingdom. But this actually is a huge blow for the Labour government. We're already seeing Rachel Reeves in enormous trouble. The OBR downgrading growth from 2% to 1%. Inflation is thought to hit 3.2% this year. We're also seeing the OBR saying more tax rises are on their way. Just from what people are saying this afternoon, they're saying, I can't afford to live as it is, let alone having any more tax rises.
This is it, and it's when you hear these headlines of kind of, oh, minimum wage has gone up a little bit, it kind of could lull you into this full sense of the fact that someone might be better off somewhere. But the increase at which minimum wages increase is far outstripped by the additional costs of everything else in your general cost of living, council tax, all of these other taxes that you were mentioning earlier. I mean, all of these things just day to day far outstrip that increase in our wage growth. And famously in the UK, public sector wages are pretty stagnant. They go up very, very small amounts. So our cost of living is just far outstripping that, and people just can't survive.
As a political commentator, what do you make of the latest polls? I was just looking at Opinion, I was looking at Find Out Now, I was looking at YouGov. There is definitely some sort of pattern here. The Labour Party down pretty much across the board, Conservatives not actually gaining that ground, and I would say this, wouldn't I, but Reform seems to be doing very well.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. In most of the polls, there's about 1 or 2 percentage points between those three parties. So we've got Labour, the Conservatives, and reform. And, you know, historically, it's not unusual for Labour and the Conservatives to be really, really close in the polls. They are, of course, the two biggest main parties traditionally, but for there to be a third party within that realm is something that is really new. Obviously, we've had similar maybe in the past with the Lib Dems back in the kind of 2010 Clegg Cameron era, just prior to that. But this is really unusual for a party that's so new and so small to be right up there with Labour and the Tories.
Let's just talk about Birmingham declaring a major incident as rubbish rots on the street. This is Birmingham City Council declaring this major incident and accused striking refuse collectors of preventing bin lorries from leaving its depots. 17,000 tonnes of uncollected rubbish to pile up on the city streets. I mean, people are saying that actually this is like something out of a war zone. There's rubbish everywhere, rats everywhere, the rats the size of sort of pigs running around. This is a major problem.
Yeah, I mean, more than, and there's so many issues as well. It's not just the fact it's unsightly to have rubbish on the streets. It is so unhygienic. It's an absolute harbour for diseases, bacteria, rats. I mean, everything possibly you can imagine. And the smell, I've heard lots of people talking about as well, especially now the sun's out, is really awful. And basically, the debate now is about whether or not those striking are actually breaking the law. What they're doing is actually standing. They've made a picket line outside the depot where the bin refuse trucks, the lorries, actually have to enter and exit from. So you basically can't drive the lorries in or out. So there's just no way, and they're refusing to move. Unite the Unions say that this is totally within the rules, it's just protesting, but there's a bit of debate at the moment to work out whether or not that is actually too far.
Well, and also the council is declaring a major incident. It's interesting, isn't it? Because the first thing the Labour government did when it came into power was to kowtow to its union paymasters, to give them walloping great pay rises, think they've got the unions on side. Well, clearly they haven't.
Yeah, it's a good point, isn't it? I think the whole purpose of that was to try and settle this dispute. And don't get me wrong, it's settling some way, that something has to happen because we have strikes in so many sectors pretty much all the time. So there was something that had to happen. That was what Labour thought should happen and would eventually kind of stop all the strikes. But clearly that hasn't really worked across the board.
Now, I saw this story, I think actually, it nearly blew my mind. This is a Labour MP who last week signed a letter calling for an airport to be built in Mirpur in Pakistan, has been accused by Reform UK of lobbying on behalf of the state-owned Pakistan International Airlines. This is Yasmin Qureshi. She represents the constituency of Bolton South and Walton. They say, Reform UK says she should focus on her constituents in Bolton. It is extraordinary. This airline was banned from British airspace in 2020. She's getting involved, saying, right, can you actually make sure they can fly into the United Kingdom? The CAA conducted a review and found last week the ban should remain in place. Then she pleaded to Pakistan's Deputy Prime Minister. She is getting involved in stuff that does not concern her in the slightest as a constituency member of Parliament.
Yeah, and I think the really interesting part about this is the fact that obviously this airline doesn't function in the UK. It's been banned from our airspace, as you say, because of queries over its safety. There were a few really serious accidents involving this airline, which led it to be banned. And in the letter, she was also asking for a rethink about the closure of the airline's London office.
That's
and I
right.
can't for the life of me work out why you need a London office for an airline that doesn't function.
But she's an MP in Bolton. She's not even an MP in London.
True. But even so, I mean, if it's a company that doesn't really have links to the UK, doesn't even function in the UK, you can't even get on one of their flights, there's not really any purpose, surely, for them to have an office. So I think there's a lot of...
But it gets worse, right? So she is saying, right, you need to build an airport in Mirpur in Pakistan. Wait for this. She, along with 7 other MPs, also voted against Heathrow being expanded.
Well, I mean, you know, super useful to have an airport in Pakistan. That's really handy for all of us, isn't it?
Well, exactly. And she's saying, oh, no, well, the reason I'm getting involved is because my constituents want to fly to Pakistan. It's none of your business.
No, and I think that's a good point. I think that's what she's defending this with. She's saying that she has a lot of Pakistani constituents, so therefore it's really important to her. However, if it's an airline that's been banned from the UK airspace, then the question isn't about an airport being built in Pakistan or the London office. It's about whether or not the airline is actually allowed to operate in the UK, which it isn't, and that is not what she was talking about in her letter. So it doesn't really Doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Wait for this, though. That airline, as you say, there was a crash claiming 97 lives. The airline was forced to ground 150 of its 434 pilots over concerns. Wait for this. This is the punchline. They may not have had valid pilot licenses.
Yeah, I mean, look, for an airline to be banned from UK airspace is a very big deal. I mean, something really serious would have to have happened, and that's clearly what happened here. I really don't think there's much likelihood of that decision being overturned or rethought in any kind of way, because it's clearly just not safe for people to use this airline. So why an MP would be advocating for anything else, I think is definitely going to raise some eyebrows across the board.
Just finally, let's talk about farmers, because I'm very much on the side of farmers. These terrible taxes that are being imposed on farmers, which means they're going to have to sell their land, which means we lose food security in this country, and of course it means the farms can't be handed down through the generations, which I think is absolutely vital. But this is a big story in The Sun. Farmers are going to escalate their protests. Wait for this, and you will be very upset by this. A hot cross bun shortage is on the cards this Easter because the farmers are going to stop transporting milling wheat that produces flour to force the Chancellor to scrap the tractor tax. They say this could lead to shortages on the supermarket shelves.
Well, yes, exactly. So milling wheat is a key ingredient in most breads, and of course, seasonally hot cross buns were coming up to Easter, and there is now concern that not only will bread production be slowed down, but also for hot cross buns as well, making it nice and topical in time for Easter, unless there is a kind of change to this tractor tax, farmer tax that Rachel Reeves has imposed, definitely putting more pressure on them to change their minds there. But you know what? So far, it just doesn't seem like that is going to happen. There's been protest after protest, lobbyists after lobbyists, people, talking about it, and it doesn't seem like the government's going to change their mind on it.
Do you think Rachel Reeves has actually been to the country?
I don't know where she's from, actually, like where she grew up. I can't think.
I think somewhere around M25, I want to guess. I don't know. I'll look it up.
Not quite the country, is it?
It's not quite the country. Alyssa, always good to talk to you. Thank you for your time. Alyssa Fitzgerald, their political correspondent. Lots of you getting in contact about the Chagos Islands. I'm really surprised at this. David, this is Adrian in Woking. I think Trump has a plan for the Chagos Islands. He would find it difficult to declare possession of the islands whilst the UK owns it. Ooh, that's interesting. But once the ownership is handed to Mauritius, the US can say it belongs to them. Wow. OK, that would be interesting if that is the case. David, so happy. This is Nafatari saying, so happy to hear you in this time slot. Why are councillors getting such huge pay rises when a lot of the councils are bankrupt? Great point. That's the point I was trying to make. £500,000 to run a council. Hi, David. One more. Listening to you reeling off the list of the utilities, etc., which are increasing in price was so depressing. Then the news that Trump is signing off the Chagos Islands. Can it get any worse? I'm 74 years old, retiree. I love my country, but I am now planning on leaving. I have told my children to do the same. That's Robert Taylor in Nottingham. That's very depressing. Let's hear more of your thoughts and your messages after this break.
Tahir Ali is the MP who a few months back stood up and urged the Prime Minister to bring back the blasphemy laws because he didn't want to see religious texts, sacrilegiously treated. Didn't want to see the Quran burnt. So this guy, he's like the MP for medieval Muslimism and also now for airports in Kashmir. It's kind of worrying that we have a representative of the British people who only seems to be interested in foreign people, not his own constituents.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Wow, you're on fire this afternoon, David. If you look in the dictionary, who's this, George? If you look in the dictionary for the latest definition of insanity, it mentions the Chagos deal. I'm sure there's some kind of puppet master who enjoys winding us up and seeing how far they can push us. Linda, thanks for your message. My father is 100 years old, was a businessman in Reading for all his life. He's been in a care home for the past 5 years. We sold his house to pay for the care home fees, which have been going up around 10% a year, 11% this year, which are now running out. We're now having to ask the council for assistance with the fees. If we put him on a boat in the English Channel, he would be better off. It's very true, it's very pithy. If we were younger, this is Margaret, we're 77, we would move. We would move abroad. I hate this country now and the way this stupid government throws on money about like there's no tomorrow. Can't believe Trump has approved that mad Chagos deal. Neither can I, which I believe Nigel will cancel. It's bizarre, isn't it? Because this is so strategically important. They belong to the United Kingdom, and yet we are paying all this money to lease them back when we already own them. It makes no sense to me. Also, I don't believe Mauritius has ever claimed sovereignty of these islands anyway. I can't believe Trump has approved that deal. Nigel will cancel it. Starmer is intent on doing the exact opposite to what the people who pay his salary in capitals want. Roll on 2029. That's Maggie. Lots of other messages coming in. Let me know, please, what impact all of these tax rises are having on your mental health. Also, what impact they have on you and your family. 0344 499 1000. Andrew is on the line from Hertfordshire. Good afternoon.
Yeah, it's not awful, April. It's a great day. It's fantastic. I couldn't be happier.
Go on.
Everybody told me the Conservative Party was the end of the world. Everybody said, no, vote Labour. So I voted Labour, and I knew this would happen. You reap what you sow. They've wrecked everything, and now the people that wanted this is what they've got. And you're interesting about reform. When the local elections come in, the results, Labour are going to be annihilated.
Well, I can't comment because we're in purdah for the local election, so obviously it is up to everyone to decide how they are going to vote. But your view is?
They'll be annihilated because so many people in this country are affected by no wage-wise because they've got to pay NI, their employer. Their elderly relatives aren't getting anything on the upside. The horrific inflation that we're staring down the throat, the money to the unions, and what you'll see in Birmingham is when the people that want to work to clear the rubbish are held hostage by the unions, that's going back to Grunwicks. So it's a really good time. The Labour Party, the most powerful, but you know the most powerful person in politics at this moment in time in this country?
Tell me, a union leader?
No. It's the Labour Red Wall MP who looks at those results and says, do you know what? There's no future in the Labour Party. I'm walking across the floor to reform. And they're going to start doing that. And then Starmer's finished.
It does feel to me that history is repeating itself. I'm old enough to remember the 1970s, all the strikes that we had, the fact is we had no water, all the rest of it, power cuts and so on. I think what Labour tried to do is they hadn't learned any of their lessons. They kowtowed to their union paymasters. They gave above-inflation pay rises to all of their union chums. And, of course, the unions sense a weak government and they're taking revenge.
Yeah, a great friend of mine ran a business and the unions came to him and demanded high wages and them consistent all the time. He said, look, if I have to sell one brick of this building to fund your wages, I'll shut the business down. Now, what we've done under the Labour government is we've sold the bricks to Great Britain to give the unions what they want. And that's what's happened. We've sold our soul to give the bullies what they want. And it's done us no good.
How long do you think Rachel Reeves has got?
Once Trump's finished with the tariffs, that's not her fault. Accidents happen. I think you'll find the first quarter of the tax take from the 5th of April will be so bad, he has to dump her. But there again, you look around, the only person he's got that's marginally capable is Streeting.
And, of course, I imagine he sees Streeting as an opponent because Streeting very much has his eyes clearly on number 10.
Oh, all of a sudden we're playing out Brown Blair, aren't we?
Maybe. I mean, certainly, there's no doubt in my mind that Streeting wants to be Prime Minister.
Yeah. No, you don't say.
Well, that's what I said. There's no doubt in my mind.
No, it's Annalisa Dodds is the one who was competent, but that she wasn't good in front of the cameras. That was the only one who actually was.
But then Keir Starmer's not good in front of the cameras.
Well, yeah, what's he good at? He's a North London lawyer. He's just good at sending you a bill and ripping you off.
Andrew, really good to talk to you this afternoon. A great April for you, you believe, because it will expose the failings of the Labour government. Keep all of these messages coming in. Loads of you getting in touch just in terms of wanting another election, saying that many of you actually did vote Labour because you believed in the rhetoric. But actually, if you think about it, Labour actually promised very little in the run-up to the election, and people voted. They voted against the Conservative Party, I think it's fair to say, and of course the Labour government was the result of all of that. Right, let's take a break. After the break, I want to talk about two-tier policing. We touched on this yesterday, but the story has evolved overnight. Also, I want to talk about the Sentencing Council, because if you remember yesterday, Shabana Mahmood said she was going to jump in and block the changes from the Sentencing Council. They have now backed down as a result. I want to talk to Peter Kirkham, who is a former Detective Chief Inspector in the Met Police. Why are we having two-tier policing in this country? Also, we have a talkTV exclusive about the number of police officers caught on duty high on drugs or still drinking alcohol or hungover from drinking alcohol. What is going on in Britain? This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome Back. Judges have climbed down over the introduction of two-tier justice rules after the government threatened legislation to block the guidance. We talked about this yesterday. Lord Justice Davis, the chairman of the Sentencing Council, announced it would suspend the guidance. That was hours before it was due to take effect today. So the council's guidance, this is what we talked about yesterday. They said they should normally consider ordering a pre-sentence report on an offender if they were, quote, an ethnic minority, cultural minority and or faith minority community, transgender, young or female. And as I said, Shabana Mahmood then threatened emergency legislation. Shabana Mahmood has addressed the Commons this afternoon, explaining why further work is needed on sentencing.
The Sentencing Council, while only 15 years old, holds an important position within the firmament of our justice system, and any changes must be made carefully and with due consideration. I am sure they will be discussed more in this House in the months ahead. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Government will today introduce the Sentencing Guidelines Pre-Sentence Reports Bill. The issue it contains are of great consequence because the path to a more equal society can only be paved by equality before the law. Again, I thank the Sentencing Council for putting a pause on their guidelines whilst Parliament has its say. I believe that we must reverse them and reassert that no race or religion should receive preferential treatment before the law, and the bill we will introduce today will achieve that. And I commend this statement to the House.
So she says no race or religion should receive preferential treatment. She also said equality before the law. Now, then the Daily Mail today is reporting that there is a new two-tier justice row. Police have been told to treat, wait for this, black and white suspects differently. This is a report by policing chiefs declaring that their commitment to racial equity does not mean treating everyone the same or being colourblind. Well, joining me now is Peter Kirkham, former Detective Chief Inspector of the Met Police. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
What do you make of this?
I don't think it's anything more than a restatement of things that have been in existence for an awful long time. Policing has never treated everybody the same.
Shouldn't it?
If you treat everybody the same, you do not deliver the same outcomes. So people should be treated according to their needs, and policing realised that some decades ago now.
Hang on a minute. Why are we treating people differently? If you break the law, you break the law.
Because people have different needs.
Like what?
And it won't be in relation to breaking the law. If the offence is there, the offence is there. But it might be in how you deal with that individual, be they a witness, a suspect, a victim, or whatever. If I can give you an example,
yes,
if you run a Meals on Wheels service, you're there to deliver a hot main meal a day to each of your clients, yeah?
Yes.
If you treat everybody the same, they all get roast beef and 2 veg and Yorkshire pudding. What if they're vegetarian? You're not delivering a main meal to that person. What if they got some religious adherence that means that they can't eat beef, or whatever it might be? You're not delivering a main meal.
No, I understand that.
Treat people according to their needs.
Okay, give me a real-life example in policing where you have to treat people differently.
It's all about the approach. I mean, you would respect somebody's religious day and not go and interfere with their religious observation.
Not if they've broken the law.
You can avoid it. Now, in the case of someone of Christian faith, that might be a Sunday. In the case of people of different faiths, it will be different days. And so you're treating them the same in respecting their religious day and not delivering policing or trying to deliver policing on their religious day, but be it on different days of the week. So you're delivering the same outcome, but you're delivering it in a different way because you're delivering it according to need.
Are you seriously telling me that you wouldn't interview a white Anglo-Saxon Christian on a Sunday if they were implicated or a suspect in a crime?
I might if it was very serious. I wouldn't if it was minor and trivial and could wait until the next week. You try and take into account people's sensitivities. Somebody who works nights, you wouldn't go and try and interview them at midday when they're probably going to be asleep. If you know that's what the case is, you'd seek to get hold of them either before they go to bed, having come home from work early in the morning, or in the early evening before they go to work later in the evening. You just try to make sure that you're delivering policing in a way that isn't causing unnecessary upset and disturbance to that individual, whether they be a suspect or a victim or witness or whatever.
But if you believe someone has committed a crime, are you saying that you would treat everyone the same or not? I'm very confused.
Yes, in terms of outcome. No, not necessarily in terms of how you go about achieving that outcome.
I don't understand.
If somebody's got learning difficulties or some other mental ill health,
right,
you may need to get an appropriate adult. A legislative reason for treating them differently because it's actually made its way into law. An awful lot of stuff hasn't made its way into law. It's there in good practice and it's there in guidance. And a police officer would be well served by thinking about the sensitivities of what they're doing as well as the actual outcomes.
Isn't this where it's gone horribly wrong, which is actually what the police are there to do, is to uphold the law?
No, it hasn't, because the law is still being upheld.
Is it?
It's just that it's being
It doesn't
done.
feel like it. We're living in an increasingly violent country. It feels like the police aren't on top of the crime wave that we're seeing across the country.
They might not be, but that's not specific to any particular race or religion or anything else. That is across the board.
OK, what do you say to Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick saying not only is this deeply unjust, it will put the British public at risk?
Referring to what?
He says that actually treating people differently and in terms of the way that you police is actually unjust.
I would say that if that's what Mr. Jenrick honestly thinks, he obviously doesn't understand what's being talked about, and/or he's making a political point.
Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp also claimed the new rules would mean officers trying to engineer the same arrest and charging rates across different ethnic groups.
There certainly shouldn't be an interference that's trying to equalise charging rates, but where you've got differentials between ethnicities or religions or any other characteristic across the piece, and there are different rates of arrest, different rates of imprisonment, different rates of whatever, you need to look at that and ask, is that because there are differential rates of offending, or is it the application of prejudice, overt or unconscious, in the terms of the application of the system? We've seen it in relation to race, particularly across all aspects of the justice system, and so that needs to be asked about. I think the guidance from the Sentencing Council was actually born out of trying to address that issue and make sure people were dealt with equally.
So if that is the case, why have they suspended the implementation of that?
My understanding is they suspended it because it was pointless bringing in guidelines that were going to be made unlawful by legislation within a few days.
And why do you think they were going to make sure that that was overturned? Why did Shabana Mahmood say that this needed to stop?
Again, I think it's probably partly due to a lack of understanding of where it's coming from and what it's all about. Unfortunately, this government, to a lesser extent than previous governments we've had recently, seem to be driven by the opinions of right-wing newspapers and media outlets rather than by what's actually going on.
So you're seriously saying the Labour government is influenced by right-wing newspapers?
Sadly, it would appear to be in cases such as this, yes.
Don't you think it's actually about equity? Because what people want in this country is if you pay for a service, what you want to see is it being upheld, regardless of race, religion or colour.
Yes, upheld fairly.
Upheld fairly. So if there is one particular racial group, which we know, I'm thinking about young black boys particularly who get in trouble with the police, then surely we need to deal with that. You're right that we need to look at the reasons that they get involved in crime, for example. But equally, you have to then dish out the punishment that is appropriate to the crime they committed.
Of course.
But that's not happening, is it?
I've not seen statistics that say that young black boys are getting lesser sentences, no.
OK.
I've seen evidence that suggests the otherwise.
Let's move on and talk about this Talk exclusive. Shocking new figures reveal cops across Britain have been caught taking drugs, turning up to work drunk, sparking fury over the integrity of UK police forces. This was an FOI, Freedom of Investigation. 112 police officers and staff found to be under the influence or in possession of drugs over the past 3 years. 83 coppers identified as being intoxicated on shift or just before clocking in. When you look at Greater Manchester, they had 80 officers or staff busted for drugs and a further 17 for being drunk at work. What's going on?
I think policing is reflecting the society that the officers are drawn from. you've got drink and drug problems in society, you're going to have drink and drug problems within a police service. The police service will do all it can to try and reduce those, and certainly when it comes to being intoxicated whilst on duty, that is a particular danger both to that officer, to their colleagues and to the public. And so that is a particular menace, if you like, that needs to be addressed. In relation to the possession of drugs whilst off duty, the police are held to different standards from the rest of us. They are going to lose their job. They're going to face greater punishment than anybody else for those same.
But isn't that right?
And so, yes, that is right and proper. And if you join the police, you appreciate that there are certain things you can and can't do that you wouldn't have been restricted by before you join the police or after you leave. And so, I mean, when it comes to drink, I think if you go back to 1829 and the formation of the Metropolitan Police, I think you'll find within a day or two a couple of them have been sacked for drunkenness.
Well, of course, we're talking about Peel and the Peelers back in the day. I know my history. Thanks ever so much.
It's nothing new.
Thanks ever so much for your time, Peter Kirkham, former Detective Chief Inspector at the Metropolitan Police. Let me hear your thoughts, please, on that two-tier justice row. Also, coppers who are drunk at work or indeed caught taking drugs, turning up to work drunk. Let me know your thoughts on all of this. Is there two-tier policing? I get the sense there is, actually, and that the police treat you differently depending on your colour, creed, whatever. And I don't think that's right. This one from Ashin Slough says, after listening to Kirkham, good afternoon, David, does allowing for a person's cultural heritage tell us something about why the police chose to visit Alison Pearson on Remembrance Sunday? Great point. They are not on the side of the British people. That is the problem, isn't it? Which is, if you have a breakdown in trust, if you don't believe the police are actually working in your best interest, then we have a major problem going on. And that is what the case of Alison Pearson highlighted rather brilliantly, I thought, that she was hounded over those social media posts. Keep all of those messages coming in. Also, Anne in London. Hello, David. I agree Birmingham Council is a disaster, but how about those creating rubbish take responsibility, not behave as when what they buy vanishes when chucked? Well, I think it's a bit harsh, actually, if you are actually disposing of your rubbish properly and sensibly in bins which aren't then collected, then it's not really up to the person who is disposing of that rubbish. Keep all of those messages coming in. Also, I just want to talk about the cost of living. David, this is Adrian in Woking. Hi, David. I have a small, medium-sized high street shop. Last year, my business rates were £340 a month. This year, it's £870 a month. That includes a 40% discount. 3 shops in the parade have closed in the last 2 weeks. Also, thanks ever so much and love the show. Thanks, Adrian. Also, I'm mindful that hospitality got a reduction in their business rates in the wake of the COVID pandemic, and they are losing that. And that is going to have a huge impact. As many of you know, I'm fighting to keep our local pub open at the moment. And, of course, the costs on hospitality, on pubs, on restaurants, and, of course, they employ people and they employ national insurance contributions and the heating and all the rest of it, electricity. It means that many of these businesses are completely unviable. Keep all of your messages coming in. Quick pause, though. Time now to find out how you could be in with a chance of winning Oasis tickets at Wembley this very summer.
How do you fancy winning tickets to the hottest gig of the century? Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to bag yourself a pair of tickets to Oasis at Wembley this summer. Plus, we're giving away a whopping 10 grand and putting you up for the weekend in a London hotel. All you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 and you're in the draw. Alternatively, you can enter by post. Once again, all you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 or you can enter by post. Good luck.
18 plus UK excluding Northern Ireland. Enter by text for £2 plus 1 standard network charge by 11 p.m. on the 7th of April 2025. Or post your name and number to Oasis Competition, PO Box 3190. Colchester CO2 8GP to arrive by 5 p.m. on the 10th of April 2025. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion.
Tahir Ali is the MP who a few months back stood up and urged the Prime Minister to bring back the blasphemy laws because he didn't want to see religious texts, sacrilegiously treated. Didn't want to see the Quran burnt. So this guy, he's like the MP for medieval Muslimism and also now for airports in Kashmir. It's kind of worrying that we have a representative of the British people who only seems to be interested in foreign people, not his own constituents.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Dr. B, for the love of God, the more expensive the minimum wage, the more expensive everything is by the same percentage. You cannot have an increase in the minimum wage and a decrease in expenses unless all providing services are not on the minimum wage. It's basic economics. People have to learn they have a value, and the only way to increase it is to work hard or to offer something unique or of value. Now, of course, we know that today is awful April because, of course, all these tax rises, stamp duty, road tax, council tax, tax rate on jobs, utility bills, TV, broadband, mobile. But Keir Starmer seems to be under the illusion that everyone is going to be better off. I don't know what planet he is on. Ricky is in London. Good afternoon.
Afternoon, David. How are you?
Yeah, I'm all right. Thank you very much indeed. What are your thoughts this afternoon?
Right, regarding the Sentencing Council, does anyone actually step back and have a look at what is actually going on with that? Because it's quite bizarre. If obviously, if they're alleging racism with the disparity between ethnic minorities and the white people, if you suspect racism, surely you address the cause of that racism rather than actually bringing out a racist law to make it fair.
So let's just look at what they said. They say they should normally consider ordering a pre-sentence report on an offender if they are an ethnic minority, cultural minority and or faith minority community, transgender, young or female. Why? I don't understand.
It's racist. It's pure and simple. There's always been mitigating circumstances, extenuating circumstances when it comes to sentences. That's been like.
But that goes across the board, regardless of your creed or colour.
Yeah, you don't bring out, if you suspect racism, you don't bring out a racist law to counteract that. What you do is you address the source of the racism. So what they need to do, they need to speak to these judges that they believe are racist and giving these unfair sentences to ethnic minorities and say to them, this is these are the figures, this is what's happening. Could you tell me why this is going on? You don't just bring out and go, oh, this is unfair. What we need to do, we need to be racist to white people and bring out a law to affect that racism to make it fair. That's just crazy, isn't it? You don't do that. I can't understand why people are not articulating it in this manner. And that your guest that you had on there a little while ago seems to agree with the Sentencing Council. So,
Peter Kirkham, the former Detective Chief Inspector in the Met. I mean, this is the other bit which I don't understand. This is the two-tier justice row, saying the police say their commitment to racial equity did not mean treating everyone the same or being colourblind. I thought the whole point was that we are all equal in the eyes of the law.
Of course we are. I mean, there's always going to be disparities. We don't live in a perfect world, do we? Life doesn't work like that. There's always going to be someone's going to get a different sentence for the same crime. You're never going to change that to a degree. You're always going to get that to a degree. But when you start bringing out laws that are specifically racist to correct a disparity of alleged racism, then that's just bonkers, isn't it? Because the idea, if you suspect racism, any racism in any environment, you address the cause of that, right? You investigate the cause of that racism. You don't just bring out rules to kind of balance it out, do you? Because that's just crazy.
Ricky, thanks for your call. David's on the line as well from London. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, David. Well, have we all forgotten what day it is? April the 1st. What normally happens on April the 1st?
Well, that's right. So actually, this morning, the team and I went through some of these stories and just double-checked they weren't April Fools.
Well, can I just say, when I've seen people kicking in doors and breaking doors down and God knows what else at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, should they have checked the person hadn't been on night shift? Can you make it up?
No, I can't make it up. I mean,
if I was eating any cornflakes, which I'm not, I'm just laughing, David. I'm laughing. I mean, so if I commit a crime on a Saturday or another day, because I'm a Christian, they won't come round here on a Sunday, is what they're saying?
Well, exactly. And then, of course, Alison Pearson and the viewer and listener who brought up that case is absolutely right, which is that I was essentially saying, so are you telling me that if you are a white Christian, the police won't come round to your house on a Sunday? Peter Kirkham said, well, that is right, because we respect your religious beliefs. Well, that's nonsense, isn't it? Because we know Alison Pearson, they came round to her house on Remembrance Sunday.
Well, he's normally very, very good, the policeman you had on.
Yes, he is. He is
very, very good. That's why I had to check what day it was.
Well, I was just very confused by his response.
Well, I can't believe it. I mean, I'm still choking here. And I'm not laughing because I'm choking with frustration. I can't believe the conversation he was having. And also bringing in a lady with the airport in Pakistan. I'll give up, David. It is April the 1st, isn't it?
Well, it is. I mean, this again, Zara Sultana, who is writing a letter asking for an airport to be built in Pakistan, even though she actually represents, I don't know if she knows where she represents, it's Bolton South and Walkden. She says, right, we need to build an airport in Mirpur in Pakistan, but at the same time opposing Heathrow. Where are their priorities?
Well, as I said, I thought I'd heard it all till this afternoon, David.
I agree. I have to say I'm speechless. Really good to talk to you, David. Thank you. Lynn says the former detective who's just been on really sums up our woke police force. There is no hope for us at all. I was hoping when Trump came in we would begin to get rid of this woke society. I never realised it was so embedded, particularly in the public sector. It's also crazy. It's eroding our way of life. It's terrifying. That's really funny, actually, because this morning I woke up and I read all these stories and I just thought I must be getting really old and grumpy because nothing makes any sense to me anymore, which is a sign of increasing age. I think you will agree. This one says Peter Kirkham is typical of why police are failing this country, from attitudes and blaming the right-wing press. For example, the police high on drugs and drink on duty. This is just poor standards. It's poor leadership in police. It's not a reflection of society. I don't turn up to work drunk. Neither do I. I'd be fired if I turned up to work drunk. It is absolutely extraordinary. Let's take another quick call. Philippa is on the line from Poole in Dorset. Good afternoon.
Hi, David. You're looking very gorgeous this afternoon.
That's very
in your pink
good.
shirt.
Thank you very much. I thought it was a little bit of spring delight.
Yeah, and pink is the colour for the season.
Wow, quite.
So you're looking right on point.
Thank you very much.
Anyway, my point is these tax rises, these price rises, the cost of living crisis is absolutely crippling this country. You know, they say, we've increased the national minimum wage and everything. That doesn't even cover it.
No.
It's costing businesses more money because of the extra increases in wages. And, you know, people still can't afford to pay their bills, even with these wage increases. So somewhere along the line, somebody is doing something wrong. And my concern is there's people who are on very low incomes having to supplement their incomes and their working incomes with universal credit. Yeah. Universal credit doesn't rise in line with inflation or the cost of living. And people, while they're trying to get full-time jobs, they actually can't live. You know, the high streets are being destroyed. We've got barber shops on every street corner and charity shops and things like that. The culture of this country is being destroyed.
There's no infrastructure anymore. You look at the problems in Birmingham with the rubbish collection and all that kind of thing. You've got the fat cats in the local councils who are earning thousands and thousands a year for their wages. We've got the debt that the councils are paying off on a daily rate is in the thousands. None of it, nobody is any good at accounting in local or national government.
I would agree, Philippa. I would agree. Thanks ever so much for your call this afternoon. Just talking about the changes to this country after the break, I'm going to be talking about free speech. So Donald Trump says there is going to be no free trade without free speech in this country. But how free are we to speak our minds in this country? That's all coming up after this break.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, a very good afternoon. Just after 3 o'clock on Tuesday, April the 1st. I'm David Bull in for Ian Collins. Coming up, more than half a dozen essential bills are set to rise from today, leaving millions of people facing hundreds of pounds in extra costs every single year. The national minimum wage has been increased too. Keir Starmer says everyone is going to feel better off. However, is it actually enough to make a big difference? Meanwhile, there will be no free trade without in the US, with the US, without free speech. That is what Prime Minister Keir Starmer has been warned, with hopes of avoiding Donald Trump's tariff hinging on the case of a pro-life activist arrested for a peaceful protest. We'll talk about that in just a second. Also, French far-right politician Marine Le Pen has vowed to appeal a court ruling barring her from public office for 5 years after being found guilty of embezzling EU funds, calling the decision political. Do get in touch, please. Let us know your thoughts on all of the above. 0344 499 1000. You can call us. You can leave a voice note as well. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can also message us on X as well. Well, a very good afternoon to you. So many of you getting in touch about these insane rises in all our bills. This is awful, April. Stamp duty, road tax, council tax, tax rate on jobs, utility bills, TV, broadband, mobile, the employer's national insurance contribution going up from 13.5% to 15%, 13.8% actually, up to 15%. Of course, many employers saying, look, we just simply don't know what to do. We're not taking people on. We're going to let people go. The whole thing is an absolute mess. Now, Keir Starmer says, actually, because we're increasing the minimum wage, people are going to feel better off. I do wonder what planet he is on, because it's not the same one I'm on. Lots of you getting in touch about all the subjects that we're talking about this afternoon. Let's move on and talk about free speech, which I think is paramount to this country. So Keir Starmer's attempts to strike this free trade deal with the United States are at risk over a free speech row, as I said. This is really extraordinary. So this happened on Sunday night. The US State Department issued a statement saying it was concerned about the freedom of expression in the United Kingdom. This is about an anti-abortion campaigner. It said it was monitoring the case of Livia Tosinski-Bolt, who was prosecuted for holding a sign near Bournemouth abortion clinic reading, "Here to talk if you want." Now, the verdict is due on Friday of this week. A source very close to the negotiations, where Starmer is trying to get this free trade deal so that he's not lumped in, or the United Kingdom isn't lumped in with the rest of the world, which seems to have failed dismally, said there will be no free trade without free speech. As we know, Donald Trump is calling this Liberation Day tomorrow. He says he's going to hit all the countries all in once. He says he's going to make America great again. That may be laudable if you're American. The worry is, of course, that other tariffs will be imposed, reciprocal tariffs from other countries. That will spark a trade war. What will that do to inflation, and what will it do to the price of goods? Now, just in terms of Miss Tosinski-Bolt, during the recent visit to the UK, a member of the US Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights and Labour met her. Vice President Vance has also said we're concerned about freedom of expression in the United Kingdom. I'm thinking back to the Munich Security Conference as well, where Vance said he feared free speech in Britain and across Europe was in retreat. I think he's right. And of course, this idea about trying to define anti-Muslim hatred, Islamophobia definition, many people worried about the chilling effect on free speech in this country. Joining me now, Mark Littlewood, Director of Popcom UK. Good afternoon.
Hi, David. Good to be with you.
Yeah, and you. Look, I am also deeply concerned about freedom of speech in this country on this one particular issue. Outside an abortion clinic, I've worked in these clinics, and a lot of the women who seek help are at the end of their wits' end. They don't know where else to turn. They've made a very difficult decision, and I've been in these situations where people are yelling things which you can hear through the window, and of course exclusion zones were put in place. So that's my personal view on that. But on the whole subject of freedom of speech, I am deeply concerned that we are no longer allowed to say what we think.
You're absolutely right, and it pains me to say it, but the American administration's got a point, and I rather hope they knock our government into shape. Freedom of speech is under serious threat in Britain. It's been eroded inch by inch, and saying something controversial, even if you say it completely peacefully, can land you in criminal difficulty. Now, I'm a bit of a purist on free trade, David. Generally speaking, I think if you don't have any tariffs and you let the free flow of goods and services across the world, that tends to enhance everybody's prosperity. But the fact of the matter is, in any kind of global trade talks, there's politics involved as well as economics. You know, we're used to impose sanctions on South Africa because of its racist apartheid regime. We've imposed sanctions on Russia because of Putin's invasion of Ukraine. So countries make judgments not based entirely on the economics, but also based on the political way that the country they're trading with operates. And it seems to me the Trump administration have a fair case in saying we are deeply concerned that freedom of speech is not protected, not universally practiced in the UK. And until it is, that will hinder your negotiations to get a great free trade deal with. Good on them for saying so.
And of course the government has launched this working group on anti-Muslim hatred, Islamophobia definition. I was looking back at this, and of course the worry which has been highlighted is that if you define Islamophobia, then there is a real risk that you will alienate people who are questioning the changing nature of the United Kingdom, which is still a predominantly Christian country. And I think it's okay to question what is going on, the religious beliefs of people in this country, and that is not Islamophobic.
No, I think that's right. And I would like us actually to get away from all of these hate crimes in totality. I mean, this is essentially a blasphemy law through the back door. You know, does broadcasting Monty Python's Life of Brian amount to a Christian hate crime, for example? We could go back to those sort of blasphemy laws.
Well,
and
of course,
we've got to get away from
it was banned, wasn't it?
It
Originally?
was.
Yeah.
It was. It was Channel 4 who decided to show it and be damned with the consequences, and that kind of broke the dam. But look, I mean, I don't applaud people going out of their way to be deliberately offensive to other people's beliefs.
Neither do I.
But it is a right. But it is a right under freedom of speech. It is okay to ridicule other people's beliefs, their religious beliefs and their political ones. And allowing people to do that is absolutely vital in a free society. And my fear here with this Islamophobia law, but across a whole range of other bases as well, is that we are putting ensuring nobody is ever offended as a higher principle than ensuring that people can honestly and openly express their views, even if those views are extreme or offensive or on occasions unpleasant. Of course, we need to illegalise activities or even speech which is directly incitement, but not speech which is just hurtful or painful or causes offence or causes umbrage. That is within the realm of what any self-respecting Western liberal democracy would unambiguously allow. And you don't have a right not to be offended. In short, we need to get away from that principle, which now seems to be out-trumping our rights to express our honest opinions, even if others disagree with them, and even if others find those opinions loathsome.
You mentioned earlier on that you think Trump is right and you hope that it will actually give the United Kingdom government a bit of a kick. Well, of course, they deeply hate the Online Safety Act, which we know regulates free speech online. We know the administration hates that in the United States because they're deeply worried about the levies, the fines that might be imposed on social media platforms, on tech companies that are based in the United States. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it, that Jonathan Reynolds, the business secretary, believes that they can still secure a deal even though Liberation Day is tomorrow. Let's just pause and listen to what he said this morning.
It appears tomorrow there'll be no country in the world exempt from the initial announcements, but then there'll be the potential to reach agreement with the US on a better way forward. I believe the work that we have done, which I would want, ideally, to be frank, to have been able to exempt us from this moment. I think that our trading relationship is a very strong and fair and balanced one, so I don't believe there's the need to do this. But I do believe we're in a position to reach agreement. Some of that comes down to the US and whether they want to do that. But I do believe not only can we get to a place where we are avoiding tariffs on each other, but we're also actually strengthening that trade relationship, giving more access for UK businesses to the US market.
What's your reading of that, Mark? That was obviously Jonathan Reynolds talking to the BBC this morning. What's your view on that? Is that wishful thinking?
Absolutely. It seemed to me almost entirely that the wish was the father of the thought, David. That what you've got to understand here is that the Online Safety Bill, as presently constructed, effectively does amount to potential tariffs on American tech companies. If we are going to have the right of the British government to extract some proportion of their annual revenues or profits, I can't remember which, but to extract money from them if they don't act in a way that we consider appropriate, then you are effectively not just imposing a tariff on American companies, but on perhaps their most dynamic growing sector in which they're world leaders. So we can't have it both ways round. If you want to get a trade deal, you need to exchange things across the table. You might not be able to get there on everything all at once. Sometimes we think that a trade deal is some enormous document which is the last word on the relationship between two countries for 100 years. In practice, you need to go back and forth every few months, always see what you can get further over the line. But if we're threatening big fines on tech companies, essentially for things they can't control, you could argue that this is a bit like levying a fine on the owner of a wall if somebody graffitis something unpleasant on that wall. Well, I would hold the graffiti artist responsible for that, not the wall owner. And if tech companies are putting in place, reasonable protections, they can't check every last thing that's posted. That's enough in my mind. So not only is this potentially an attack on freedom of speech, but it's a major tariff on an important sector of American business. Don't be surprised, therefore, if any negotiations we have with the American administration about trying to liberalise trade end up rather stuck in the quicksand.
Let's just talk about the economy. Of course, the OBR has downgraded the prospects for the United Kingdom. This is on the back of Rachel Reeves' spring statement. If you recall, also, the government, I think, has now committed to getting defence spending to 2.5%. There is no other reason other than to pacify the United States. It is the right decision, in my humble opinion. But also, in terms of our economic situation, the OBR also says that actually the reality is that given that Rachel Reeves has given all this money to her union mates, there is no doubt there will be more tax rises, despite the fact that Rachel Reeves says there are no more tax rises coming down the road.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, but I actually think the problem is, David, at some point you are taxing the economy to the absolute maximum. And I suspect that if we're not at that point, we're a whisker away from it, such that if you try to dial up any taxes even more, you actually find that your revenues decline. Because people decide, I don't know, they're going to retire early, not strive for that promotion, potentially even leave the country. I mean, for crying out loud, we've got more millionaires deserting Britain than any other country in the world, bar China. This is a catastrophe for tax revenue. So I wonder whether we've actually now reached the limits of dialing up tax. You just simply can't turn it up anymore. If you do, you'll have a higher rate of tax, but you might actually have less revenue coming into the coffers. We're taxing at about 38% of national income if you add all taxes together, and that's the most any government has ever been able to tax out of the economy in peacetime. So the heavy lifting, frankly, has to be done by finding savings, by finding spending reductions. We cannot keep having the government spending at the level it is, not just today, but if you look forward a few years, it gets worse and worse and worse with an ageing population, requiring health treatment, social care and all of the rest of it, with a public sector pensions time bomb. We really do have to make savings now because in terms of the state of the public finances, we are careering to the edge of a cliff. And even if you slow down, you're still going to go over the edge of that cliff. You need to actually do a U-turn. That means public sector savings and efficiencies, no more tax rises. And if you want to get that growth rate up, David, which doesn't solve every problem in Britain, but my God, it would mitigate a lot of them. The best way of getting that growth rate up is to ease the tax burden and ease regulations. Stop tearing down red tape rather than erecting it. And I'm afraid this Labour government has shown no appetite to do either of those
Well,
things.
of course, it's an anathema.
Almost an addiction to more state spending.
Well, it's an anathema to the Labour government, isn't it? It's ingrained in their DNA. They're all about raising tax.
That's absolutely right. But, I mean, unfortunately, or perhaps you might even say fortunately, the Labour Party's broad instincts or ideology here is now clashing with economic reality. I was trying to make a mathematical point rather than an ideological one. And it might be that they stumble across the truth that if they really are even remotely serious, that growth is their number one priority, that as Keir Starmer said, they would be laser focused on it. That means it is a higher priority than anything else, carbon net zero, decent payouts to their trade union friends. Well, if it really is, they're going to have to tilt in a lower tax, less regulation direction. But I fear, David, you might be right. We'll probably just see a government in paralysis that doesn't actually have the guts to embrace that sort of agenda. So I'm afraid that, you know, my message to you and your viewers and listeners is cheer up, things can only get worse.
Well, I mean, I think you make some great points. You know, you've got the billionaire Lashmi Mittal considering leaving the UK. Charlie Mullins also has written a piece today in one of the broadsheets talking about why he moved to Spain because he's sick and tired of paying so much tax. I mean, clearly, I think most people realise that actually if you reduce the tax burden, it incentivises people to work hard, to grow their businesses, to employ people. If you tax them to the hilt, they can't afford to live and therefore the business is closed. I don't think that's rocket science.
No, that's right, David. And it's also particularly true at the very high end. It's not that I've got a soft spot for millionaires and billionaires or, you know, cry into my pillow at night worrying about their plight. But if you're actually interested in getting revenues in, here are a couple of stats to conjure with. The top 1% of earners provide more than a quarter of all income tax receipts. Now, I'm not suggesting that all of that top 1% are just going to flee the country, but that gives you an idea of the proportion of tax that's at stake. And the top 10% of earners contribute well more than half of all income tax receipts. So if you are in any way deterring those people from working, or worse still, encouraging them to flee the country altogether, don't feel any pain in your heart for them, but do feel some concern that the Treasury will not be bringing in the sort of money it previously was, and therefore funding things like the National Health Service, schools, hospitals, road networks, our court system becomes that much more difficult, and you need to dial up the tax on the people slightly lower down the ladder. So I actually think the way out of this is lower rates, higher revenues, but also crucially to unblock the economy from the vast amount of regulation we've got. We're in danger of converting the UK from being a nation of producers to being a nation of compliers. We're all spending all of our time going around making sure we're compliant with regulation. And of course, we've got to be compliant with some basic regulation. But if you spend all of your time doing that and worrying about that and not producing, don't be surprised that your growth rate is on the floor and that everything gets harder year on year and year. And I'm afraid that's rather the doom spiral we've now got ourselves into.
Mark, really good to talk to you. Mark Littlewood there, director of PopCon UK. Let me just bring you some breaking news. A man has been shot dead by police in Milton Keynes. Officers from Thames Valley Police and British Transport Police were called to reports a man carrying a firearm at the city's train station this lunchtime. Police don't believe there is any further risk to the public. That's a man being shot dead by police in Milton Keynes. We'll bring you more on that story as and when we get it. Time for a break. After the break, I'm going to take your calls and your thoughts. Lots of you getting in touch about the taxes, the spiralling taxes on pensions, the taxes on your utilities. Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Anybody to go online and have a read of them. You'll probably be shaking your head as you do, thinking, why are the police not abiding by these in 2025? But one of them was that the police are the public and the public are the police. What that essentially means is the police aren't a special breed of people. They've been drawn from the public to do a job of protecting the public. So as people, let alone police officers, I'm sure they are going to be shaking their heads in disbelief.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. Loads of you getting in touch. Georgina is on the line from London. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Dr. David. You're a vision of gorgeousness as ever.
Oh, you're very kind, thank you.
Oh, bless your heart. I'd love to be able to sleep for the rest of April if this is how it's starting. I mean, wage rises are not in keeping with the rate of inflation. The British public can't maintain this political free-for-all by the Labour Party, David, and Starmer cannot keep slithering back to the public pocket to bail him out of the financial holes that he keeps digging for this country. I mean, the two huge ones are the illegal migrant emergency and net zero. Taxes have been raised so high that your average working man cannot afford to live now.
Correct.
They even tax you when you're dead with inheritance tax, and don't get me started on the council tax. The only thing that hasn't been taxed is intimacy. And I'll tell you something, if he thought he could get away with that, then that would be in the pipeline.
Or breathing. A tax on breathing might be useful.
Yeah, well, that as well, you know, or bring back the old-fashioned window tax. Why don't we do that? I mean, Starmer's putting UK businesses out of business. The economic growth of this country has been stagnated. And they even now are blaming prior Tory governments for the disgraceful handling. I used to be a Tory girl and always have been all my life, but I'll tell you something, not a chance anymore. You know, the Tories are blaming the Labour are blaming the Tories for the disgraceful handling of this country while giving themselves a 2.8% pay rise for the privilege. What's going on, David? Keir Starmer is totally delusional. I'm surprised his nose doesn't grow when he's doing these interviews on television. He should be hanging his head in shame. And I'll tell you what he must do for the UK. He's got to resign and do us all a favour.
But who would replace him?
Well, do you know what? There's only one man that I would say replace him, and he's not a Labour man. That's Nigel Farage every time. I mean, this guy wants the best. He is the Donald Trump of Britain. He wants the best for the people and the country. And by George, that man is going to do it. I have every faith in him.
I mean, it was interesting on Friday at the Reform rally, Nigel Farage. Oh, you were there?
Darling, I was there. And honestly, I've never seen so many standing ovations for one person. It was absolutely phenomenal. Go, Nigel, that's all I say.
And, of course, he made it very clear that anyone here illegally would be deported. He also mentioned Dodge, didn't he, or bringing in a British equivalent of Dodge.
Well, I mean, what he said about the illegal immigrants that was music to my ears, because there's been so many rumours going around that, you know, he wasn't going to do it and he'd lost faith. He nailed the hat on that. Anyone who comes here on the back of a lorry or in a boat will be sent back. No exceptions. And he wants to know where the taxpayers' money is going to. And by golly, if he says it, he will do it. He's a man of his word, and that's what we need in this country.
It was quite interesting, actually. There was an article saying that the political parties across the board should be very mindful of what is going on in terms of the political polls and also the event that happened on Friday. I have to be careful because we're in Purda, and so I can't mention certain things. But when you look at the flux in the polls, and I'm looking across YouGov, Opinion, Techne, Find Out Now, there is an enormous shift going on. And if I was Keir Starmer, I would be deeply worried.
Well, let me tell you, both of these ancient parties, they are outdated now. They are not in touch with the British public. Neither party. They are terrified. They will do anything they can to discredit this man. He's got to watch his back, because let me tell you, they do not play cleanly.
So it's quite interesting, isn't it, with Keir Starmer? Because, yet again this morning, he made a speech saying that actually working people will be better off, which is a blatant lie, actually, across the board. But I think he believes it, and I don't know where he's getting this information from. He is going to have to, at some point, realise that his sinking poll ratings are based on the performance of the Labour government, and someone has to take the fall. Now, it's either him or it's Rachel Reeves, and my money is on the latter.
Well, let me tell you, their political advisor reading these books must be Stevie Wonder, because they are not reading the British public, David. They do not know what's going on. I mean, one of his right side women, I think, is it Rachel Reeves or the other one? I'm not too sure. I'm not too bothered. But she says, "Oh, I come from a council estate."
Oh, Angela Rayner.
It makes it worse because that girl should realise what people who are living on the breadline actually go through on a day-to-day basis. She wants horsewhipping for what she's doing to these people. It's totally unacceptable.
It's also, for me, it's also the lack of understanding of those people in the middle, those people where both parents work all hours to do whatever they want. They don't take holidays, they pay whatever, you know, they're law-abiding citizens. They decide to send their children, say, to an independent school, which is, say, their priority. And then the Labour government says, well, actually, ideologically, we oppose this, so we're going to force you to send your kids into state schools, even though there aren't places for your children, because we believe in this sort of meritocracy. But at the same time, many of these economic foundations believe that it will cost the government money. It makes no sense.
The education system is underfunded as it is. Education in this country is suffering to a level where a lot of children can't even read when they leave school. Is this not telling these people anything? They are not in touch. The mummies and daddies who work themselves to death to send their children to private school, and believe me, I know a lot of these people, and they have had to put their children in the state education system. This is a travesty. This is our future, and this is why Nigel has got to get into government ASAP and do something about it, because he will.
Really good to talk to you, Georgina, and thanks for your lovely comments as well about my sartorial elegance, I would say. Georgina in London, there are loads of you getting in touch. Stuart in Perthshire, afternoon, David. I think Trump has a big problem all over the world regarding his car industry, and that is that American cars have also always had a reputation for being terrible. Perhaps that's why they import so many cars from Europe, but they have a lot of difficulty exporting. Keith in Durham, good afternoon, David. I'm a 71-year-old pensioner. I'm sick and tired of paying taxes on my meagre pensions to enable this government to put illegal migrants into hotels, along with all the freebies they get. I'm fed up of being treated like a second-class citizen in my own country. Also, we were talking about this yesterday, just the sheer cost of translation services in hospitals. There is another point to this, which is actually, and I know this having been there and worked in a hospital, which is actually your time, your clinical time is doubled or tripled if you have a translator, because you ask a question, the translator asks the patient the question, the patient answers the translator asks you. So therefore your consultation time increases dramatically, and therefore you can't see as many patients. The whole thing doesn't make any sense at all. Keep all your messages coming in, please. The number 0344 499 1000. After the break, I want to talk about Marine Le Pen. This is a really interesting case about Marine Le Pen being blocked from running for office. Also, her 4-year prison sentence, which we'll talk about. Frank Furedi, director of MCC Brussels, will be joining me after this break. The question is, what happens next? And we'll be talking about that after this break. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Let's talk about Marine Le Pen now. She has criticised a court ruling that bans her from running for public office as a political decision. I said to Julia yesterday, I thought it was incredibly convenient, the timing. She says she will appeal. The French far-right politician was found guilty yesterday of embezzling EU funds, and she was barred from standing in an election for 5 years with immediate effect. So, unless that can be overturned, and it looks highly unlikely that she can do it in the time before the 2027 presidential election, she can't stand. At the same time, she's been given a 4-year prison sentence, 2 of which are suspended, 2 of which she has to wear a tag. She says, also, by the way, she's been given a €100,000 fine. Millions of French people are outraged, claiming that judges have implemented measures that are reserved for authoritarian regimes. She says she will appeal. The appeals trial will probably not happen for another year. A verdict would come several months after that. Frank Faradi, Director of MCC Brussels, joins me this afternoon. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
You know the European Parliament very well, as do I. I did think the timing was very interesting.
It is, and I think that lawfare at the moment is being used quite systematically as a way of trying to eliminate individuals who might win an election against your interests. And I think in France in particular, it's absolutely the case that the party that Marine represents, the National Rally, is the largest party at the moment. It's doing really well in the polls. And there's a very good chance that she would have won the presidency, which goes against the grain, goes against the interest of what the French centrist political establishment want. And you could tell for the last year that by hook or crook, they were going to use the courts as a way of trying to marginalize her and try to put a quarantine around her party. And you have to remember that this is not the first case of a politician who's doing really well in the polls being banned from running for office by the courts. Happened in Romania just very recently. What we're seeing throughout Europe, particularly in the European Union, is the increasing use of the judiciary as the political instrument to get things done, things that the parliament by itself couldn't do, just as a way of short-circuiting the process of ensuring that nothing changes in Europe.
Well, so just in terms of the verdict, the judge, Benedict de Perthius, said Le Pen had been at the heart of the system which saw the embezzlement of €2.9 million worth of European funds. 24 figures in the party were found guilty. The party was ordered to pay a €2 million fine with half the amount suspended. So the crux of this is that she was accused, with 20 other figures in the party, of hiring assistants, which you can do, but they have to work on matters which are pertinent to the European Parliament and the running thereof, and you cannot use it for party political reasons. Now, she says she's going to appeal that. The President of the United States, Donald Trump, says it is a big deal that French far-right politician Marine Le Pen had been found guilty and banned from running in the 2027 presidential election. Let's just pause and hear what Donald Trump had to say about this. We'll bring you that in just a moment. Just in terms of the European Union, she also has had enormous support, hasn't she, from Frank, from across the political spectrum. We're seeing, I've spoken a great deal about this, which is actually, you're seeing across Europe the rise of the centre-right, the right of centre parties. Viktor Orban declared on X, he said, he just posted 3 words, Je suis Marine, I am Marine. Geert Wilders, the leader of the Netherlands' largest political party, also posted. He said, I'm sure Le Pen will win the appeal, that she will be France's next president. Italy's Deputy Prime Minister Matteo Salvini also said, we're not intimidated, full speed ahead, my friend. And of course, what you're seeing is that actually, in many senses, when you've got leaders like that and Donald Trump weighing in and saying that it is a big deal, then I think there is a problem. Let's just pause. Let's bring you that clip now of Donald Trump.
That's a big deal.
That's a very big deal. I know all about it, and a lot of people thought she wasn't going to be convicted of anything, and I don't know if it means conviction, but she was banned for running for 5 years, and she's the leading candidate. That sounds like this country. That sounds very much like this country.
Frank, what do you make of that?
Well, I think it's very true, because what we're seeing today in Europe is a situation where the old political establishment has unraveled, where the centrist parties that have ruled Europe since the Second World War are becoming less and less able to keep hold of their electorate. And as a result of that, you have this incredible upsurge of new conservative and right-wing parties that are gaining popularity. And it's not just simply old people, old conservatives who are in the frame. A lot of young people who in the past would have gone to the left have shifted to the right in places like the Netherlands. And therefore, precisely because there's this earthquake that has erupted, you have an attempt to basically find new instruments to keep things the way they are. And I think she has become the victim of what we're seeing throughout Europe, of this attempt to hold the line by the old political establishment, by the European Commission, but they basically want to ensure that change is minimized. They basically want to create a situation where they criminalize their political opponents. They turn them into morally unworthy individuals. And in this particular way, they hope to kind of keep still and ensure that the European Union remains intact in the way it is. And particularly that popular politicians in places like the Netherlands or in France and elsewhere aren't going to see the breakthrough that is really, a long time coming. I just hope that somewhere along the line, this kind of juridification of public life, the politicization of the judiciary is going to be seriously challenged, because part of democracy historically has been the fact that we respected, there was a clear distinction between the courts and parliament. And today that distinction is being fast eroded.
And of course, you and I both know that misuse and abuse of the expenses, the very generous expenses in the European Parliament, is widespread. I was just looking at the numbers, so that the annual budget is €369,000. There are other allowances on top of that. The monthly allowance is €30,769. So you can then employ, as I did, you employ assistants to help you with your business in the European Parliament. But also, when you look at the numbers, between 2019 and 2022, 139 MEPs, almost 1 in 5, were found to be in breach of the rules. And then all of them, bar one, actually escaped public scrutiny by simply paying back the money. So it seems they are actually using this as a way to silence Marine Le Pen.
Absolutely. As you're suggesting, I know from experience that virtually every MEP I know is using this particular game of using that money to support their political parties, because it's very generous allowance. They don't actually need all that money for their own assistants and for themselves. And there's a lot of this recycling, money laundering going on. Now, you might say that that's not right procedurally, but I do think that it's a bit of a stretch to call that some kind of morally reprehensible crime, given the fact that that is the way things are done in the EU. And as you know, there are so many corruption charges and corruption cases going on at the moment that make Marine Le Pen look like Joan of Arc as a bit of a saint in comparison. So I do think there is something of a double standard here that we need to really look at and criticize.
I mean, it's interesting. Someone, Vincent, has just messaged saying the French courts are putting out a fire with gasoline. I think the point here is this is going to backfire spectacularly.
I hope so. I think that from what I hear from my friends in Paris, there's a lot of discussion going on whether they should protest, whether they should basically find a more moderate way of reacting against it, because they basically are worried about unleashing a situation whose outcome will be very difficult to predict. But there's a lot of anger, particularly in those areas of France where the support for the rally is really, really strong. And I think we'll see what happens, because in the next few days, a dynamic will have set in, which I think hopefully will blow up in the face of Macron, the president of France, and his coterie. So, watch this space, because it's going to be very, very exciting times, not just in France, but throughout Europe.
Frank, always good to talk to you. That's Frank Ferretti, Director of MCC Brussels. Well, time now to find out how you could be in with a chance of winning Oasis tickets at Wembley. Yes, this summer.
How'd you fancy winning tickets to the hottest gig of the century? Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to bag yourself a pair of tickets to Oasis at Wembley this summer. Plus, we're giving away a whopping 10 grand and putting you up for the weekend in a London hotel. All you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 and you're in the draw. Alternatively, you can enter by post. Once again, all you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 or you can enter by post. Good luck.
18 plus UK excluding Northern Ireland. Enter by text for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on the 7th of April 2025. Or post your name and number to Oasis Competition, PO Box 3190. Colchester CO2 8GP to arrive by 5 p.m. on the 10th of April 2025. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion.
After the disaster that we had with some of those unvetted candidates at the last general election, you know, I made a pledge that I would professionalise the party. And, you know, there are some people that don't like it, but generally, look, you know, last year in the local elections, Reform fielded candidates in 12% of seats. On May the 1st, we will be at or damn close to 100%. We've set up 400 branches. You know, we are professionalising it, and it does come with a certain ruthlessness.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk. We've been talking about all sorts of things, actually. I was talking to Peter Kirkham earlier, former Detective Chief Inspector in the Met Police. We were talking about actually treating people differently. I said that is unacceptable. This one says, David, this man is not telling the truth because I know for a fact that the police would not consider if a person was a Christian and to therefore not pay a visit on a Sunday. That is absolutely not true. We know, don't we, from Alison Pearson, that is not true. I know due to my employment, I believe the police should just crack on, do their job on any day necessary, which they do in brackets. I just want to correct that man's misinformation. Thank you for that. Lots of others about that interview as well. Martin says he sounds like he's towing the line to me. Katie in York, good afternoon, says if the police were to wait until the Monday rather than the Sunday due to religious reasons, imagine how much more damage a criminal could do in that extra day, or how far they could escape in that extra day. The whole thing's ridiculous. If a crime had been committed, the criminal has had no regard for other people's lives, so why should the police act in a way that benefits the criminal? Everything in this country is absolutely backwards. I know. Also, this one, I'm disabled 68-year-old pensioner on a base flat rate pension with pension credit. I'm a full-time single dad to a 14-year-old boy. I am trying to downsize. I'm trying to sell my house. I no longer wish to live in my homeland. I need to relocate for my son's best interest. Wendy is on the line from Oxfordshire. Good afternoon.
Hello, Dr. David.
Hello.
I'm ringing in really not quite for what you're talking about, but I'm politically lost, but I haven't got a party that I feel that I can vote for.
Right.
Because I think we have got to have some sort of, I don't know what you call it, some sort of policy. When the next government gets in, all we can vote on is what they tell us.
Yes.
Now, Labour said they were going to look after pensioners.
Yes.
They took their winter fuel allowance away.
They did.
Even though they said it was likely to kill 4,000 of them.
Yes. 5,000, I think, die every single year as a result.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they've gone for the farmers who feed us.
I know.
It's no good us having solar power and houses if we're sat inside starving.
I agree.
I don't get their logic.
Well, there isn't any.
And then Waspy Women, they said they'd stay with them. They've done, done a U-turn. Fuel bills, they said, would be lower. Well, they're doubled. In the hotels, they said they were doing away with them. We get more every week. And they said they'd do something about the amount of people coming in. They've done none of it. And I just think we need some sort of...
I think the word you're looking for is contract, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. So I agree.
The next government will do what they say they're going to do.
I would agree with that because I agree totally that actually if you come into an election and you promise the electorate this, it's a bit like if someone was to sell you, I don't know, a product or double glazing. They say this is what this does, this is the contract, this is what you're going to pay for this. If we don't deliver, then you can get a refund. And I think that is true, which is that if you have a contract so all the political parties sign up, they say instead of a manifesto, this is our contract to the people, and therefore it is binding. So if you get into power, you have to deliver.
I mean, I understand they may not be able to do everything they say, but they've got to attempt to.
They have to attempt to, that's right.
Labour hasn't tried to do any of this. They said they're getting on all this stuff, and then they've just done the opposite. And we've got to have something, David Bull, for the next party that we know when we vote, that's what we'll get.
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it, that I think many people also are politically homeless. We're seeing the polls shifting dramatically in terms of the way that people are thinking of voting. What would, apart from having a contract, is there anything that would then... Is there one particular policy that would make you vote for a particular party?
Well, I'm really against what Labour are doing with our free speech. We really need something about immigration. We can't take this many people. It takes a week to get an appointment if you're lucky.
Yeah. And of course,
cannot cope with them all.
And of course, Keir Starmer held or is holding this meeting about immigration. He's talking about chucking more money upstream to other countries to stop people coming over illegally. But it seems to me that when you see videos like the one in The Sun today of migrants, illegal migrants coming to this country, filming themselves in a hotel room, which seems very nice to me, which is being paid for by the British taxpayer, they are taking the Michael.
Yeah, and to be fair, Dr. Bull, I know I don't know what I'm allowed to say and what I'm not, but our homeless people they're lucky if they get a concrete path or a doorstep.
I agree.
And that's our veterans and everything. They don't get a 4-star hotel.
No. And so just in terms, I mean, would you like to see the government being far more robust in terms of turning away people who've come to this country illegally?
Yes, because we've just got too many. You know, I know places they have awful loads, but they're not in a war-torn country in France.
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it, how many are young men making that journey across the water. You don't see families coming across.
No, that is my worry as well. We have got, when you look at all these migrant hotels, they're full of young men.
Mm.
I mean, already our women are saying they're afraid to go out on their own at night. You know, it's just bad, and I don't know what will happen. Won't matter to me, Dr. Bull, I'm older, but my grandchildren aren't.
Well, I think it does. I do think it matters to you. Wendy, thanks very much for your call. Garfield is on the line from Derbyshire. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, David. Listen, with Wes Streeting's acting career about to start, could he perhaps be contended as a Mr. Bond? Miss Money Grabber Rachel Reeves as his faithful secretary, Stromberg's drama villain Twin Starmer.
Very good. You've thought about that, haven't you?
Thank you. As regard, I've been pondering this. If I can just have 2 minutes, have you heard of a house of multiple occupations?
Of course I have.
Right. I've worked in some. There's 10 bunk beds in the front room. When they put these migrants in the hotel room, is it one migrant per room?
No, I think there is a limit, but I think it's quite low, like 2, maybe up to 4 in some. I think they actually reduced it to 2.
Right. Well, the point is that what's happening is in a private dwelling and with the council who's checking the correct fire systems, whereas a hotel has what they call it, all the proper fire procedures and things. You could stack them on top of each other, and as one migrant goes out to wash cars, another one could be coming from his job and climbing in his bed.
Absolutely, as they call it, hot bedding. Yes, you're right. And of course that goes back to the issue about council tax as well, of course, which is the council tax is the same regardless of how many people live in that property. Thanks very much, Garfield. Really good to talk to you. Peter Cardwell.
Hello there. I've brought you your fan mail.
From you?
No, yeah, from me, yes, because I just posted it through the post. I just give you a letter each week.
You do. Listen, I've got a message, actually. Looking very handsome in pink, Dr. B. I hope Cardi B is in the matching shirt next to you. Failed. You didn't get the memo. Julia was in pink. I'm in pinkish.
But I wear pink on Wednesdays. On Wednesdays we wear pink.
Oh, do we?
On Wednesdays we wear pink. Yeah. I see. Have you not seen Mean Girls?
I'm sure Julia has. And what is Tuesday? Grey?
This is not grey. This is light blue.
Oh, light blue. Yeah. Right. Okay.
Thank you. I've got.
Should have gone to Specsavers.
I've got 21 shirts, 7 in blue.
Oh yes,
7
you have,
in white, 7 in pink.
Not OCD by any means.
Not at all. No, totally normal.
Totally normal. Yeah. Yes, just like you. What's coming up?
Well, new two-tier police race guide row as officers have been told to treat black and white suspects differently. Yes, really. The Sentencing Council victory there will be reflecting on that.
Yes.
A victory for common sense, but of course, as soon as you whack one mole, there's another one. The Town Hall rich list, there's the chief executive. How much do you think the chief executive of Glasgow Council?
500.
Yeah, it's mad. It's totally mad.
I know.
Also cooked up coppers
I
as well.
I really want that job, actually. I would like to run a council and get paid.
Glasgow?
No, well, I'd like to run a council and get paid £500,000 to do so.
It'd be nice. It'd be nice.
Yeah,
it'd be very nice. I would imagine it would be all right.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about
cooked up coppers. That's a great talk exclusive.
It is. It absolutely is. Also, Donald Trump on the Chagos Islands as well. He's let us down there.
Are you as surprised as I am if he has signed that off?
No, I think he was always going to do it.
Was he?
I don't know if there's method in his madness. I think he's going to do it. Well, I don't know. I don't know if he cares, to be honest. I think
he should care.
Well, of course he should. It's silly. I think it allows the Chinese far more access and far more intelligence than they should have had previously.
Yes, I would
Also,
agree.
have your bills gone up today?
Every bill has gone through the roof.
So, my council tax went up 4.9%.
Yeah.
Right. And I got my water bill today, right? Nearly £100 a month for a single person.
Yeah,
I have a lodger every
So I was just
reading.
I haven't had a bill yet, but my water bill will have gone up 19%.
Yeah, mine went up 28%.
Wow.
28%. It's nearly £100 a month.
That's a lot.
For a small flat for one person.
Yes.
I have a lodger a couple of nights a week, but that's yeah. Listen, if you know, with the greatest of respect, I don't mean to be insensitive here. You know, the two of us are on okay salaries. There are a load of people who aren't. And but there are a load of people in this country who are not, who don't have enough money. And this is, you know, everybody's talking about it. This is Bill Mageddon, and we're going to talk about it throughout the programme.
And yet Keir Starmer doesn't get it. He says everyone's going to be better off.
No, I don't feel better. Do you feel better off? I mean, I don't feel better off.
No.
Yeah, I mean, the minimum wage has gone up, the living wage has gone up, but if the bills go up all the time and above inflation, well, how are people going to cope? It's a big issue. Everybody's talking about it. I've been talking to people on the street, I've been talking to people in this building, everybody's talking about it today, and we're going to be talking about it between 4 and 7. What do you do, and what's the government going to do to help us?
What do you do? And